across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Yeah, how you doing? Good morning. It's still summer. It's another stonking week in the sunshine. The fifth heat. We've never been out of a heat wave, really. I think he was saying it's the fifth heat wave. I don't think it's been below 24 degrees in most of the kind. Appreciate if you're not in an area. If you're in Lerwick in the Shetlands, it's never above about 14. But generally speaking, summer is still here. Monday, 10th of August. Colin's in for Kyle. And so much to get through. As I mentioned just before the news, Andy Burnham will start his national tour today to hear people's concerns over the cost of living. The PM will spend much of the rest of August in what Downing Street are describing as listening mode. That is your job, Mr. Burnham, to listen, but then, of course, to act. What would you tell the Prime Minister when it comes to cost of living and your overarching concerns? If he shows up at your front door, hello, I'm just a normal chap. What are you going to tell him? One area that he doesn't like to talk about, of course, is immigration, which is a bit tricky, as a survey out today shows that Brits have become even more fed up and angry about immigration than ever. 43% say immigration has mostly been bad for the UK. That's up a whapping 10%, a whopping 10% even. In the last 10 years, it's on the rise. What a surprise. And if he wants to stay silent on that, surely he can't stay silent any longer on prison places. This story is growing by the day. We hear today that many of those released early will just simply go on to commit more crimes. The estimate is 90,000 more crimes, to be more specific. What will Andy Burnham do about that? And not only do we have the diabolical possibility of the killers of PC Andy Harper being released early, we've now been told that 3 terrorists who plotted to blow up planes, killing hundreds, could be free within weeks. The Al-Qaeda trio were jailed in 2010. Do you not stay in the slammer for life when that happens? And what do you do to unwind? Serious question about Britain's hobbies and pastimes. Apparently, there's a bit of growing trend for reenactment, dressing up as a knight, jumping on a horse and doing some jousting or medieval combat. Some folk love a bit of armoured roleplay, it seems. Unusual hobbies and pastimes is always worth a bit of a chat. You can message us on that, whether it's you or somebody you work with, someone in the family you don't talk to any longer. 0344 499 1000. That's how you get in touch. You can leave a voice note there as well. 87222 if you're sending us a message. And Charlie Rowley, despite the emails, is still back with us. It's the same line every week. I'll never tire of it. Others might. Charlie Rowley is back with us for a bit of a chat. Have you ever whipped out your jousting stick for a bit of weekend fun?
It's been known once. And yes, what an interesting, what an interesting.
I used to go to school with a girl whose dad did this stuff, the kind of Knights of the Round Table thing, and they all turn up in a field, and I think it's probably quite an expensive hobby. They all turn up in a field and they just, you know, pretend to have a fight.
Was it Hampstead Heath?
That's right. You should see some of the weapons that pop out of a bush over there. This was Detling, Maidstone, where they would often have these big shows. But the people that did and I don't want to mock anybody's hobbies, I think there's quite a good sort of history to it. I think those that do this are genuinely interested in the history and all the rest of it. The jousting thing, whilst it's not quite the same thing, I don't think they used to joust to almost kill, didn't they? I mean, it was, you know, a battle to the end, I think. Was jousting just a fun thing, or was it a way to settle scores?
No, I think you're right. I think it was a definitive, you know, end to someone's
straight in the
battling career.
Straight in the solar plexus. No messing around there.
No.
There's a hand just offered you a cup of coffee. Look at that. That was brilliant, wasn't it? I don't get that kind of treatment. I have to wait for about an hour. So wait till the news is on, Collins. Well, no, Rowley gets his cuppa.
After a hard night's jousting.
That's what you need. Brew. Unwind with Maxwell House. And there was another thing. I worked at you know, when I left school, I worked at a holiday camp, as you do, at Pontins, and they had these themed weekends and one was a country and western weekend, and people dress up as cowboys and cowgirl. One was an Elvis weekend. That was a whole different story. Yes, and they take it very seriously. And the cowboy weekend was in another kind of league of seriousness. So if somebody was a sheriff, they had to be deferred to throughout the course of the weekend. You didn't just walk past a sheriff because he might arrest you. Seriously, they took it very, very seriously.
Wow.
No messing around. You can't do that. There was one guy that was an undertaker. He played an undertaker. So they would choose whatever their garb was that they wanted to dress up in.
The life and soul of the party, obviously.
Yeah. He sat on his own.
Yeah, no one wanted to go and speak to the Undertaker. He was dancing on the tables, wasn't he?
Yes. He was a thoroughly morose man. He was just utterly miserable. But the point is that if people walked past the Undertaker, I think they had to bow their head, because he was a man that, you know, took their fellow cowboys to God.
Mm.
But what intrigues me about this is that, you know, people have kind of hobbies, and that's great. And, you know, for some people it's golf, and I've never got. I can't tell. I think I know more people into golf than not into golf. I find it utterly bizarre. If you ever see me with a club, shoot me in the foot. I'm telling you, or anywhere, frankly. Yeah, just finish me off. Not a great bit of advice.
Be careful what you wish for around the corridors around here. So.
It's I just can't do the golf thing. I just don't quite.
I can't watch golf, I have to say. I mean, my granddad used to watch it all the time, whenever it was on, and I couldn't bear it. I think it's the most boring
My
thing.
mother-in-law loves a bit of golf.
No,
she loves it.
I don't mind. I've never actually played a full round of golf. I used to do a bit of golf when I was younger. I used to have a few golf lessons, actually, which was, you know, not bad on a Saturday morning. And then, you know, I used to go a bit of pitch and putt, which is nice to be out there.
Pitch and putt, a bit of kind of crazy golf, that kind of stuff. Yeah. That's all right at the seaside and places like that. But the actual golf, it's like, you know, you've got a big stick and you're trying to put this ball in. Just pick the ball up and put it in the hole. I mean, you save yourself all that. Just cut out that stick stuff.
Yes, yeah. Well, I mean, let's not be too hasty.
And also, I'm a bit suspicious. You know when, like, the Tiger Woods of this world are kind of playing, and they're kind of, you know, 2 miles away, and they whack a ball, and it goes in the hole. That's luck, right? Yeah. That's luck. You know, all right, you're aiming for the ballpark, as it were. You're obviously going in the right direction, but the fact you get that in a hole...
Yeah.
You can't aim for that hole from a mile away, surely.
No, I mean...
That's preposterous.
It's got to be a bit of luck. But the amount of money that's in golf is incredible, I think. You know, the sponsorship and...
in the sport, but also money. I think for those who play it, you know, buying a good set of clubs and joining a local golf club costs a fortune as well. Yeah. And it seems like, I don't, was it Oscar Wilde, that it's a good walk ruined or something, or somebody that said something of that nature. But I get it, you know. I got too many mates who do it to mock it too harshly. But so, on the basis of this, just looking at sort of people who are joining things like medieval combat, and these people get injured as well in medieval combat. I mean, it's kind of like, I don't think it's a recognised martial arts. I don't think we'll be seeing it in the Olympics anytime soon. No. Although they did try to bring... They tried to bring darts into the Olympics once, didn't they?
Yes, and I maintain that darts is not a sport. I mean, you know, I'm afraid, you know, anything that requires a bit of physical activity is a sport. I mean, I think that's the
got to be a physical component, isn't it, really?
I mean, even fishing is more of a, you know, where you've got to sort of reel in, you know, if you're tackling, wrestling an angry pike, you know, of a particular size.
That's right, or some old trout.
Or some old I've been referred to that once or twice on a weekend myself.
Oh, look who's just walked in. Trout. So I'm confused on this. So with hobbies and pastimes, and kind of, I'd love to hear from anyone who either does any of this stuff themselves. I don't just mean the reenactment specifically, but any kind of pastime or hobby that's just a little bit out there, a bit different. Whether it's a collecting thing, whether it's, you know, a sporty thing that's just a bit unusual. That kind of stuff. I'm all up for some of that. We'll take those voice notes and calls 0344 499 1000. Keith in Nottingham says, if Burnham was to knock on my door, I would probably give him the shirt off my back, because him and his government have taken everything else. There you go. Fair point.
Well, yeah.
He's only been there a fortnight. Sorry.
Yeah, yes, it's come for your clothes.
Yeah.
So, recycling.
Indeed. Dave in Aberdeen says, morning Ian, why the hell is Burnham wasting money travelling the country asking people about their concerns? They never listen or act on them. All the big stuff, they don't act. It's interesting. I was listening to, on the way in today, a little kind of documentary piece about the 2010 general election. And they were majoring in on the moment that Gordon Brown was caught with that microphone on in the back of the car. I think her name was Mrs. Duffy.
Gillian Duffy.
Gillian Duffy.
Yes.
Gillian Duffy always sounds like an actress.
Yes, yeah.
So every time I think it's Gillian Duffy, no, Gillian Duffy's someone else. Gillian Duffy. And, of course, he got in the back of the car. He just had a chat with her. She was a Labour voter all her life, and she raised the issue of immigration. And Gordon Brown then said to one of his advisors said, who was that? He said, oh, just some bigoted woman. And all hell broke loose because it was recorded. He then had to go on, I think he went on the Jeremy Vine show and had to apologise. And they had a camera in the studio as well, which was a little more unusual then. But they managed to, the BBC, to be fair, the BBC got one in there and made sure this was on record. There he was with his head in his hands saying, you know, I'm really sorry, I didn't mean to do this. I think he then went to her house, went inside the house. He got in there for 45. I don't know what he was doing, decorating the place. I think. Is there anything I can do for you, Mrs. Duffy? Well, my dining room needs doing, so
Yes,
I don't know what he did in that time. It was a terrible, terrible moment. But the fact is, that, and it went into this detail on the thing I was listening to, they were saying they just couldn't get Gordon Brown to get on board with the immigration debate. He could not. Everything in his politics, his entire political DNA, his makeup, simply precluded him from going there. He wouldn't entertain it. They would say, look, the figures are quite big, Prime Minister. These are Labour advisors saying it's not about racism, Prime Minister. It's about the fact that that local authority has got like 10,000 more people living there than it did half an hour ago. That takes extra money. That takes housing. That takes consideration about schools and services. You've got to do something about it. He couldn't go there. He just couldn't get animated or opinionated in any form about it because it was just... Jeremy Corbyn and the like, you can't get these people to go there. They won't do it. They won't do it. I think Burnham is cut from that same cloth. I think the same thing will happen. The idea that he's going to get... he will never use words like, this is unacceptable, even when talking about the change. He just won't do it. And yet we've got more Brits that think that immigration is a bad thing, generally mostly bad, when asked that question on a YouGov poll. 43%, so nearly half of people think it's mostly bad. There's others who think it's, you know, quite bad. So, I mean, I think anybody, it doesn't matter whether you're left or right, just on the numbers would say, whether it's legal immigration, whether it's illegal immigration, this is a big issue. It feeds into the cost of living crisis, of course, because it costs an arm and a leg to facilitate our immigration policy.
Absolutely no, Ian. I think you're totally on the money there. And people, you know, it's not a left or right issue. Immigration now, it is very much a central issue where politicians from all political wings have to get a grip on. And you've got to tackle it head on. You've got to call it out for what it is. And you're absolutely right. It's not just the illegal immigration. It's not just the small boat crossings where we're seeing people who then do get put up in hotels at the expense of the taxpayer, where they can't necessarily be deported. You know, when the legal immigration has got to a point where actually, we've brought people in, advertised jobs, but those people haven't necessarily been able to support themselves or have stayed with those jobs and therefore find themselves unemployed and therefore entitled to benefits, and it's an ongoing saga. And plus, those people are able to bring their families across with them. So the UK greater workforce is ending up paying for people who were legal migrants but are now unemployed, as well as illegal immigrants.
What I find interesting about this is the way, you're right, it's not a left and right issue. If you'd have gone back to, and you could still probably do this, to sort of the old working men's clubs. I mean, some are still around, but when they were quite prolific. And these would have been Labour clubs, not all, there were Conservative working men's clubs, but, you know, the old Labour clubs, and talk about immigration. That would be almost number one on their list. It wouldn't have been that long ago. You'd have had Labour supporting people very, very passionate about immigration. It was a working man's kind of theme because, of course, it involved jobs and communities and all those issues, and of course the money. So it would, I would suggest, quite safely have been very much a working class Labour left-wing issue not that long ago. And it wouldn't have been weird to hear people getting animated and disturbed about all of that. Today, it's kind of seen as, no, this is just something Reform talk about. And the minute we talk about it, why can't Andy Burnham use words like unacceptable? I'd love to hear him stand up and say, what we've got in this country is an unacceptable level of immigration. Whether it's legal, whether it's illegal, we have an unacceptable level, and I'm going to do something about it. You won't hear those words.
Yeah. And I think it goes back to what you were talking about just a second ago. There's an ideology and a mentality, and if you say it so many times, if you've been in the Labour Party for the best part of 20 years, 30 years, under the Blair project as well, and when we expanded, a lot of people coming from mainland Europe, you then believe this idea that all immigration has been good.
Correct.
All immigration has been to the benefit of the UK economy, and anyone that dare questions that or challenges that, you must be part of the far right, or you must be back in the day, because it was under the two-party system, you must be a Conservative, and Conservatives, want to talk down the economy, they want to talk down immigration, whereas, the Labour Party are the soft, cuddly, nice, friendly, progressive, social, open-minded, open-hearted party that, where there's something for everybody, and that includes immigrants. And we've just got to get back to that balance. You're absolutely right in saying, look, some immigration has been good, there's no doubt about it, but the levels are far too high now. We've got to put a brake on it, you've got to put a stop on it, a pause for however long, just to get our economy moving again, and to making sure that people that do come to the country can sustain and support themselves, and people that are coming to the country illegally are swiftly deported.
I was in a hospital yesterday and went to see my sister. She's in hospital, hypochondriac, that one. Anyway, there she is. She's in the hospital and she's getting better and stuff. And I would say most, if not all, of the staff that I encountered in the very short period, I don't overstay my welcome when I'm down there, were foreign nationals working in the NHS. So these are people who are skilled, they're doctors, they're nurses. That's the acceptable form of immigration. Now, obviously, if you could man the NHS solely with indigenous Brits, to coin that phrase, then that would be fantastic. That's something we haven't been able to do. The NHS is absolutely massive. It can't happen. So you get lots of foreign workers working in there. I get that. These are people that have worked for years. It's their job. They've settled here. They have probably lived here longer than they lived in their country of origin. They pay their taxes. That's not the issue that we talk about. The issue is going to inner cities where there are thousands and thousands of people who are not in work or meaningful work. They are therefore even if they have good intentions, let's be generous on this, even if they came with a dream to, I'm going to lead a new life, who are a net drain on the economy as distinct from a contributor. Those groups, those areas that no one really talks about, you're just not going to hear Burnham get animated about this.
No, because again, I think he probably feels, they've come, yes, for a better life, and and there's always that hope and that chance that they will again become a contributor to society. Sure. But the reality is, if you've been unemployed for the best part of a decade, if it hasn't worked out, well then you've got to have a conversation about that to say, well, hold on, if you're in social housing in the UK being propped up by the UK taxpayer, if you're in a receipt of benefits by hard-working Brits, on a Monday morning today going to work, as alarm clock Brits do. These are the people who are the voter, who are making the contribution to the UK Treasury, who are then funding the lifestyle and the life of those people that have, attempted to come here and maybe, as you say, to be generous, have attempted a new life here. But if it hasn't worked out, or if they're not contributing, then you've got to get them to do so.
Indeed. Charlie Rowley is with us, 0344 499 1000 on all of that. We'll come on to the prisons thing as well in a moment. Curious, unconventional, unusual hobbies and pastimes, things you do if you were an indoor hang glider. I want to hear all about it. Underwater bingo, I don't know, whatever it is you practice the weekend as a bit of time out, the way to relax. Reenactment seems to be quite big. Yeah, we're talking medieval combat and round table stuff, dressing up as knights and going out for battle in a field in the middle of nowhere. There's that too. Collection. People collect odd things as well, don't they? I mean, there's obviously stamps and coins, but beyond that.
Oh, yes.
Taxidermy.
Oh,
For some reason, I've always had an overwhelming desire to own a stuffed ferret. And I know you've got to be careful with that taxidermy lark because some of it is poor.
well, can you imagine? You know, you've had a cat that's, you know, no.
Does anybody had their pet stuffed? I mean, we've got to look at this kind of thing, you know, whether it's, you know...
If your cat passed that undertaker at that party and ended up, you know, well...
But did the
stuffed
cat
and then-
still look like the cat? That's the problem, isn't it? There was famously a TV show called That's Life, run by Esther Ranson. She used to present this like a consumer show. And there was... I've interviewed Esther on this point. In fact, I didn't even have to... I said to her, I've got to ask you about... And she just mentioned the name of the cat. She knew what I was going to say. Because what she did, she told the story of this kind of slightly dubious taxidermist. And they showed a photograph of Tiddles, the cat. And then Esther pulled the cloth over the thing the taxidermist made. It didn't look like the cat.
Oh.
It didn't even look like a cat, let alone the person's cat. It was a car crash of a cat.
It was a ginger tabby before.
Indeed, yes. There was something wrong with it. Terribly wrong with this beast. Anyway, we'll take calls on that. 0344 499 1000. Let's get a voice note on Andy Burnham. This comes from Angry Rob. Morning, Rob.
Morning, Ian. Morning, Charlie. Rob, on my way to work. Listen to you talking about Burnham. Love that guy. So what's he going to call this tour, then, where he's travelling the country? The Full of Bull tour? Is he going to call it the I'm just going to gaslight the pants off your tour? Is it going to be the I'm going to tax you to death and take everything you own tour? Is it going to be Are you ready for Marxism tour? Is it going to be the I'm going to call you far right and bigots and racists and fascists, and then I'm going to give you a house to somebody who don't belong here tour? I'm dying to see what he does. I tell you what, I'd love him to knock on my door. The first thing I'd do is give him his bag so he can carry his teeth home.
We've been on the beaches for 2 days running. Both days we've been hassled by the local French police. They've turned up armed to the teeth, looking very aggressive. We've had to arm ourselves, actually, with gas masks. They're checking our ID, wanting to know what we're doing here. They should show as much enthusiasm, I think, with the migrants. They seem to be waving them through and hassling us. But this morning, they asked for my ID. I told them to clear off. I said, you got it yesterday. You're not hassling me on the beach on my morning stroll.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
It is Talk Morning. Welcome back. 26 minutes after 6 o'clock. It's Ian Collins in for Jeremy Carr for the remainder of this week. Charlie Rowley is with us. Loads to talk about here. JB in Aberdeenshire says, I collect stamps. It's a painful hobby, but meet many willing participants. I used to collect stamps as a kid. And I have no idea what happened to my album.
Oh.
I'm sure I had a penny black in there somewhere. I used to convince myself that, you know, because you could send off for stamps which weren't really collectible stamps as a kid. You know, you'd see adverts for these things and they would just send you a load of stamps, but they weren't real stamps, as it were.
But that's a real sort of collector's item, isn't it, stamps? I mean, that's been going back a long time. I mean, I used to collect... I mean, when I was a kid, you know, you used to have these football stickers, didn't you?
Yeah.
You used to have these albums that used to...
Our house is literally consumed with panini stickers. They're everywhere.
That's still a thing today.
Massive.
Great.
Yes. It matters. It helps when you have a brother-in-law who works for Panini. Oh. It's a bit of an assistance to the collection.
There you go.
But yeah, the kids are collecting, or the younger ones collecting them.
Mm. And Pogs, do you remember Pogs? I mean,
Pogs.
That used to be a thing.
That was a thing, wasn't it? Collecting coins. I've got a coin. Now, this must have come from my dad, and it must have come from somebody in his family, I think. I think it was that side of the family. So I've got a coin that is from 1582. It's a bit knackered. It's not as rounded as it was, and I had this coin forever, and along with a few others in there. I don't know if there's any value to this, but the 1582 one, I thought I'm going to look this thing up. Oh no, sorry. I think I was in York, and I saw a similar coin in the window of a coin collector's shop, and I went in, and I asked the guy, and I said, "Oh, I've got one of those," and he said, "Yes, loads of them, mate."
Oh.
There's loads around. I said, what do they cost? He said, about a tenner.
Oh.
Really? And then I looked it up more recently. I took a picture of it, stuck it through AI, said, is this of any value? And it came back the same thing. If it's in amazing condition, you might get 50 quid. But you're never going to find one, very few in amazing condition.
Well, the value surely would only go up, I suppose, the longer you hold on
Yeah,
to
but I
it,
think it's like certain parts of the country, you can find Roman remains, and, you think, wow, I've got a bit of a Roman vase. It's like, yes, so's everybody else in this area. They're oddly not that unusual. There are certain areas. Patrick in Kent says, commentators say legal immigrants. They bring their families with them. This is +8, so multiply, say, 100,000, it becomes at least 900,000, of which at least 3 will be elderly needing extra NHS care. Please let us take this into consideration. It's never really talked about. I mean, not every immigrant can bring members of the family with them. You often find, I've never understood this, somebody goes to Australia, they go travelling, they meet somebody, fall in love, and think, great, we'll come and move to the UK. And the Home Office goes, no, your wife can't come with you. It's like, why not? It's my wife from Australia. Well, it's like, well, you're bringing people in from all sorts of parts of the world. Some don't even speak English. Yes. This is a Commonwealth country. She speaks perfect English.
Yeah.
No, sorry, it's going to cost you about 10 grand to go through the process. So there's that. I never understand that.
Yeah, no, totally. And I think there is a difference. I remember this debate because I can't quite remember what the story was, but it was a couple of years ago now, where there was a whole debate about spouses in particular. Yeah. And I do think there is a case to be made for people. Well, if you've got the system, firing on all cylinders as it should be, where you have people that are coming to the country to work in a proper, a good job where, as I say, they can sustain themselves, they've got a good income, they don't necessarily need or will be able to rely on the state, and if you can prove that you can also support your spouse. If you're married to someone and you're moving to the UK to make a contribution, I think it's pretty okay to be able to bring your wife or husband or civil partner or along with you. And if you happen to have kids, okay, fine. But at least that individual that is coming in the first place is making a contribution. But you're right, the idea that we don't do... But we do in other certain circumstances allow people to just get a job, and it might be low skilled, and then all of a sudden they're able to bring, as that text said, all and sundry of their family, second cousins twice removed.
I don't understand how this ever worked. I mean, at what point did nobody in the Home Office go, well, there's got to be a bit of a regulation around this. I mean, you might be able to bring your partner, but the idea you can bring your Auntie Maureen is just frankly ridiculous.
Yeah, I mean, and I think...
As nice as she might be.
Well, yes, I won't hear a word against. sort of.
So there is that.
Yes.
Bill in Cheshire says, immigrants working in the NHS, great, trained engineers, etc. Remember how we welcomed Polish builders a few years back, very hard working, cheaper quality and work. But now the vast majority of boats and lorries are full of untrained, undocumented economic migrants who are of minimal or zero use to the economy. When will we realise this? Well, most of us, and I think Bill's probably on board on this as well, did realise this. I mean, I don't think there's any benefits to be gained in that respect. It's not just channel migration, which interestingly makes up quite a small percentage of the overarching problem, but it's a very visual one, so we sort of major on it quite a bit. Student overstayers is another big one. So you come with your visa and then you just don't ever go back again. And again, you may or may not have completed your course. Your course may or may not be of any discernible value to the UK economy. You're not utilising it in any kind of way, and you end up kind of just sort of disappearing into the ether. But you're still here. So there's thousands of people in that situation as well. Max says Andy Burnham travelling the country in a tour bus. He loves a bus, does our Andy. He wanted the keys to number 10, but hardly ever there. He's not there a lot, is he?
Well, he's just been on holiday, isn't he? 2 weeks in and then fancied a bit of a holiday.
2 weeks in Skegness as well.
Oh, is that where he's been?
No.
Oh.
Just invented that. It's a nice thought, isn't it? You'd like to think he went somewhere with a bit of sunshine. I don't begrudge him. I think it's a bit weird that he took a holiday so soon, but it could have been they said, well, look, if you don't take one now, in October you've got the NATO summit, then you've got this, then you literally won't be able to take one until like next April or something. So there might have been a logistical reason. It's just not the best look. I'm not going to dwell too much on the holiday. I want the bloke to get stuff done. I want him, he talks about a man that speaks people's language. This is the real test for Andy Burnham. He's a normal bloke. He's got a normal accent. He's not part, he says he's not part of the establishment. I mean, he's establishment through and through. He's only ever done work within the establishment. That's been his whole career. Whether he was very junior back in the day, he's been, cabinet minister in the Brown government, worked in the Blair government as well. Mayor of Greater Manchester, Prime Minister in the most curious sort of stepping stone fashion. That's all he's ever done. But, yeah, he's a normal bloke. He likes normal tea and white bread. So good for him. Well, do some normal things, Mr Burnham, and respond. Just respond to the things that concern people. And immigration is right up there. It's absolutely right up there.
Absolutely. And as you say, it's all very well giving away these, sweets in the first couple of weeks to say, right, I'll, take the 20% off VAT hospitality. Something that, after the last 2 years, it was a Labour government that put on the rise in national insurance contributions and business rates, and along with the increase in minimum wage, which has put a lot of our hospitality sector under strain. So he's only reversing things that I think that his predecessor, Sir Keir Starmer and Rachel Reeves, had sort of, put on to us. So, no real brownie points for that. But you're right, it's the big ticket items. It's the small boats crossings during the summer that obviously are going to be rife, and that are rife, and that needs to be tackled. But also, the early release scheme, where we're still hearing, potentially very hard and fast criminals could be let out.
I mean, look at this. 3 terrorists who plotted to kill thousands by blowing up planes with liquid bombs could be free in weeks after launching their parole bids. Now, this is as I understand it, we're going to talk to Ricky Freelove, who wrote this story. It's the front page of The Sun. It's interesting we're going to have Ricky on because he used to be the producer of this show. It was the first producer I worked with here at Saw.
Great
and recently moved to a different part of the company. And it's a great piece of journalism that he's got here. This is this sort of Al-Qaeda trio. This is where the 100 millilitre rule of your liquid... This is why I can't take me Creed on an aeroplane. Because of these characters. So their 2006 plot was foiled by cops and MI5, and it led to the biggest clampdown in aviation history. So all those big, hard rules came really as a result of these people. Zia Youssef for Reform says people will be appalled. They could be back on the streets. We'll speak to Zia Youssef, I think, in the next hour. Dean, is that right? I think we've got Zia coming on with us. We're not speaking to Zia this morning. We will be talking more on this story. So stand by for all of that. Ricky's going to join us in the studio too to tell us more about this. But I would have thought, is that not a life sentence, an automatic, you're there forever, if this is the kind of thing you were up to? Yeah,
well, you'd imagine. I mean, they were sentenced, to life with a minimum of 20 years. And I suppose, in 2006, then, the 20 years is the minimum that they're approaching. So they are now apparently eligible for parole. You'd imagine. I mean, but, with a parole board and a justice system that is so under the strain and will no doubt now be processing in order, given that it's a government decision to release prisoners early, I think there are so many other things you can do before that. But maybe we'll come to that in a second. But, these people, the parole board and parole system is looking through case by case to see who could they actually release early. The parole board should not be wasting time receiving a letter from these 3 solicitor or lawyer to say, right, they've served their minimum of 20 years now. Come on, they might have plotted to blow up thousands of people, they might have changed the entire way in which aviation travel has been dictated upon thousands of passengers, not just in the UK but globally. But they're reformed characters. Come on, let them out. Just give them a little tag on the bottom of their ankle. Of course, it should be completely thrown. Nobody should even be wasting a second on these three, I'm afraid. But that's the kind of system and justice system that we're now dealing with.
Spot on. More from Charlie in a couple of moments' time. I'll tell you who Nigel Farage has been speaking to as well about foreign criminals in this country. There's a big belief, it's not just a big belief, some real anger. We've got thousands and thousands of foreign criminals who should, if you got rid of that lot and sent them back to their country of origin, then you'd have more prison places, like substantially more prison places. Nigel Farage has an idea. We'll come to that in a second. Charlie's still with us, 0344 499 1000. Weird, quirky hobbies and pastimes on a slightly lighter note. Andy Burnham's tour of the UK. It's the cost of living. He's in listening mode, apparently. Yes, that, as I said at the beginning, it's not an optional extra to be in listening mode, Prime Minister. That is actually literally your ongoing. It's in perpetuity, that position. Listening mode is what you are meant to do all of the time. Lines are open on that. You can message 87222. Let's get a voice note on Andy Burnham. This comes from Jackie. Morning to you, Jackie.
Morning, Ian. If Andy Burnham turned up at my door, I'd say to him, get back to Westminster, formulate some plan to save this country instead of messing about with sticking plaster policies.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
It is Talk, 0344 499 1000. Let's mention this as well, because Nigel Farage has opened talks with El Salvador on deporting all foreign criminals to its hellhole prison should he become Prime Minister. The Sun can reveal that a reform delegation will head to Central America within months for feasibility discussions with its government. So if they win the next election, Mr Farage will announce a drastic expansion of his plans to send Britain's most depraved murderers and rapists to its jails. He will now seek to deport 10,000 foreign lags currently in the UK to third countries to free up desperately needed space.
No, and I think, look, if it's the case that people in the UK who commit and carry out these vile crimes, whether it's sort of the rape and murder and all the rest of it, if you don't fear going to a UK prison, then you jolly well should fear going to a prison in El Salvador. I mean, I've seen some of these sort of, prison documentaries, these sort of worldwide, the world's toughest prisons, probably with Ross Kemp or something like that. El Salvador...
I don't take any story seriously unless Ross Kemp is... Once he's hosting it, it's like this is the real deal now.
It's the real... Oh, yes. It's rough, and it's rough out. I mean, it really is, the way that they treat some of their prisoners. It is hard. There's no... There's none of this, PlayStations in your cells. There's no sort of, free time, as much as you get here. So, if that wouldn't put a deterrent
Yes.
up you to sort of prevent you doing some of these awful crimes anyway, then I don't know what will. I think it's a very, very good and smart move.
Yeah.
And I know he's also talking about, setting up Nightingale prisons. So like we had during COVID, we had these pop-up NHS facilities for people who, might have suffered from COVID and needed either ventilation or just, we had pop-up jab centres taking place across the country where people getting their jabs. We had a plan in place for overcrowding of prisons, or if we had to move prisoners out of the prison estate into other areas, and that included ex-army barracks. It also included, I think, taking over disused holiday camps, like, a certain, you mentioned Skegness earlier on, a certain Butlins might have been earmarked whilst it wasn't in use for just the removal of prisons. Now, OK, people might think that that's a bit of a holiday, but I think people would rather still see their criminals, convicted criminals, incarcerated somewhere, even if it is a makeshift sort of prison where you have your freedoms curtailed rather than just roaming the streets.
I mean, I think the El Salvador thing is really interesting because it would put the fear of God into people as well. The thought that you might end up, if you commit a crime, you're going to go to El Salvador. And you're right, you see those documentaries, whether it's Louis Theroux or Ross Kemp, and there's always sort of, this afternoon I'm going to meet Miguel on Sea Wing. Miguel ate everybody in his street. And you think, oh, right, this is a serious criminal. Especially when you discover 150 people lived on his street. And Miguel ate them. So these are the kind of, horror show people they're dealing with. And they often almost... Some of those prisons sort of run themselves, don't they?
Oh, I mean, it's...
From the inside, they're run by...
Oh, yeah, and the gangs, that will probably operate in those prisons. I mean, it is not a nice place to be. So I think it's, I think it's good. But also, just to your point, it's a deterrent as well. The idea that you'd be put on a plane and sent over to El Salvador, I mean, again, you would absolutely put the fear of God into you. But that should be happening, I think. I don't want to sound like an old... an old-timer, on a record. But, if the Rwanda scheme had actually worked, if we'd started to see any flights of seeing people deported and removed to Rwanda, that might have just been a deterrent. I think it would have been a deterrent.
I think it would have been. I don't think the scheme was perfect because it was never a case that you arrive on the shores of Dover and then you're taken to Gatwick and off you go, was it? You then went into the system and they worked backwards from the people that were already sort of, and those that hadn't got a legal case. So the ECHR thing would have still kicked in and it might have been clunky, and I wonder whether Rishi Sunak called that election knowing that if he didn't call that election, what would have happened is the Rwanda scheme would have been up and running. And I think I made this point on Friday. I don't know if you were here when I was talking about it, but it would have been... He might have been in a position where for the first few months, only a handful of people went to Rwanda, which could have been a worse look than nobody going to Rwanda. If we got 2 months in and they said, oh, so far 22 people have gone to Rwanda, you think, hang on, 6,000 have crossed the channel in that time. You've sent 22 people there.
Yes.
Which I think the spirit of that scheme was digested that by most people that's what would happen. You get to Dover, you go to Rwanda. But that wasn't going to happen quite like that.
Yeah,
but it might have worked.
Yes. Yeah, it might have been prevented. Absolutely, it might have been a deterrent for people trying to make that crossing in the first place. But you're right, the optics would have been crucial. You can't have a plane taking off that's only got about 6 people on it. You need it to be a full flight over. But also just there was no real clear messaging about Rwanda. On the one hand, people were saying, oh, yes, it's a deterrent because we're going to send you to Rwanda, which should then sort of suggest it's not a really nice place for you to be. So don't make that crossing in the first place because you're at risk of going to Rwanda. Yeah. But on the other hand, people say, well, actually, it's a very nice country. It's well developed.
It was a bit curious because in order to ward off the opposition to Rwanda, which was that it's still on the Foreign Office website as a place you shouldn't go to, and it's a terrible place, the government were almost forced to release kind of exotic videos of the place. How wonderful it was. It's like, well, hang on, be careful what you do there because that's not really deterrent-based if you're doing that.
Exactly. To placate anyone that thought, oh, there'll be human rights abuses in Rwanda, say, no, it's a very establised, very nice,
beautiful
growing
place.
Economy.
You can wander. All their prisons are open prisons. You can go wherever you want. It's absolutely lovely. But would it have worked? Again, back to the Andy Burnham thing. Pete in Shropshire says, regarding Andy Burnham trotting off on holiday 2 weeks after getting the job, he's a government employee. What do you expect? It goes with the territory, doesn't it, if you work in that world? Maggie says Burnham is going to do his Please Like Me, I'm an Ordinary Guy tour. He may seem popular, but that's not hard, seeing as his predecessor was as dull as ditch water. Wouldn't it be great if Andy Burnham talked about El Salvador?
Yeah.
Why not? See, this is the problem with our politics. Why could Andy Burnham not do the same thing? Why can he not stand up and go, you know, I've thought long and hard about this. I know some political parties are agitating for, you know, El Salvador. It's a great idea. They're willing to do this. We'll pay them less than we pay to hold these people in jail, and they become somebody else's problem.
Yeah, no, I think, you know, it's not... I think the only thing I can think of, just to get to it, is that I think he would probably think that actually, you know, that would be a human rights issue. Actually, you can't just deport people to a completely foreign prison, somewhere particularly as tough as El Salvador. You know, he'd probably want to say, right, we've got to look at returns back to their own country first of all. So if you're, you know, a prisoner in the UK today, but you're originally from Afghanistan, for example, you'd be sent back to Afghanistan. So they'd want to do bilateral arrangements. But that takes time. But if you've got a country that is willing to take you, yeah, for a cost, but I think people would be prepared to pay that cost if it's cheaper than keeping them in the UK and they're a foreign national and they're taking up a prison place that actually we might need to convict prisoners in this country or to prevent the release of people early, then I think it's definitely something that people should be looking into.
Is Andy Burnham going on a bus?
Well...
Maybe not from Downing Street.
No, well, he took a flight from Glasgow.
He's leaving this morning. He arrives on Wednesday in Manchester on his bus.
Well, yeah, but this is the thing. Your eagle-eyed listeners, and you know, he presents himself as the man of the people, obviously. But he took a flight from Glasgow to Manchester just to be in Number 10 North a week or so ago. So I wouldn't be surprised if he's sort of jet-setting around, all the while sort of turning up at pubs and saying, "Oh, fancy a bag of pork scratchings, and, you know, a pint of bitter."
I won't have a pint. I'll just have half because my plane's waiting.
Yeah, exactly.
You know? I think he took 3 flights, didn't he? I think he took a flight from London to Glasgow for the Commonwealth Games opening ceremony. Then he went from Glasgow to Manchester, and I think he took another flight from Manchester back down to...
Well, there you go.
It's a lot of flights.
It's a lot of flights, yeah.
24 hours, isn't it? Andy Burnham is out there today. This week, he's in listening mode. He's listening to the country. What do you want him to say? This is mostly about the cost of living. That's the whole point of this. He's addressing the cost of living crisis. He has no wiggle room on this. There is no wiggle room financially to do anything substantial. The areas, as you rightly said a second ago, Charlie, where small businesses, for example, were clobbered with this extra national insurance hike, and small businesses are not, you know, they're often family run. They are ordinary working people, despite what Angela Rayner liked to say. Landlords are working people as well, Angela Rayner. Remember all of that debacle when she got confused on what constitutes a working person. So I don't actually know what Andy Burnham can do in terms of being, you know, seen going into the odd pub, turning up at a community centre, maybe visiting a school, which would be a bit quiet during the summer holidays, but I don't know, that kind of stuff. Say, you know, what are your concerns? I'm listening. What are your concerns? I don't know where he can go. If people say, well, my concerns are my electricity bill, yes, you've taken the VAT off, which was the smallest part of the bill anyway. What I'd like you to do is to actually halve the cost of the energy itself. That might be handy. I know you can't do it every night. Direction of travel. I'd like you to do something about prison places. All feeds into the cost of living. I'd like you to do something about immigration, which massively fits in to the cost of living in terms of the expense of this country. More on that, 0344 499 1000. Charlie Rowley's still with us as well. It's 10 to 7. Let's get a voice note on Andy Burnham. This comes from George. Morning to you, George.
Morning, Ian. Hope you're having a great show. So, if Andy Pandy turned up at my door, I'd say, get off my land. That man is not welcome on my land. Get him off.
council staff who don't follow the law be sacked? And should councillors who urge them not to lose their roles and lose the whip?
Well, I don't know. Is the answer?
Why don't you know?
It would depend.
I know the answer to that.
Depend on the circumstances.
No, it wouldn't.
Before I start calling for
if you urge people to break the law, you shouldn't be in public office.
I think it would depend on the manner in which that was done and the circumstances.
Why?
But my overall point is that they need to abide by the code.
So if they need to abide by the code and they don't, they'd be breaking the law and urging someone else to break the law.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
We've got a lot going on here. Car washes and swimming pools could face water bans as the UK is set for another heat wave. We'll come on to that. Office workers who unwind by walloping each other with swords. That reenactment stuff. It's called medieval combat, apparently. And Britain's first ever degree in wokery, which trains students to work in DEI.
Oh.
God's sake.
Oh, dear.
Michael says, back to the old professor from Cambridge, says, which we haven't discussed this morning, but it's here. He says, it's a serious criminal offence to make false claims on a CV to attain a job. I wonder what possible reason Professor Jason Ardey has not been arrested. I think it's a bit nuanced, because obviously if you apply for a job and say I'm a qualified neurosurgeon, and the nearest you've got to the medical world is playing a game of Operation. if that's the removing the bread basket. What was that all about? Why was that a thing? Is that an organ? Then that's obviously a criminal offence. But I think if you say I raised some money for charity, or I, once published a book, if it's not specifically relevant to your job. But now there's sort of lots of people coming forward saying, what did this man ever have any qualifications for the job?
Yes.
Because I was kind of giving him the benefit of the doubt. I was arguing that, well, yeah, he had the degree, he'd done that. It's not like he hadn't ever been to school. But now there are people questioning the entirety of the guy's background.
Yeah, I mean, it is extraordinary. The more that seems to be coming out about this guy, that he'd sort of ran 600 miles in sort of 6 days.
3 hours.
Yes, yeah. And by the end, he sort of said his leg was swollen so much he was sort of, it was almost hanging off. And then there's pictures of him at the finishing line, sort of,
exactly.
Full body, record time.
Your leg looks fine, Jace.
Yeah, exactly. And you're right, he got a PhD, so... Well, we're led to believe. So he must have got through the system, but how much of that was plagiarised? That's the question. But doing a master's degree before that, I mean, maybe that needs to be looked into. But he has gone through, the system of education and jumping through those hoops to get to where he's
just not as glorious as he claimed, and various appointments that in places he said he'd worked at, either in this country or elsewhere, have no record of him working there.
Yeah, which
is kind of so. I don't know whether I was being over-generous when I said, well, no, he's still got a degree, he's got a PhD and all the rest of it. So that stands, but I'm reading stuff now with people going, well, I'm not so sure it does. I mean, you could argue that if you've only got to take a paragraph from somebody else's work and then you've plagiarised, and therefore, I suppose, technically, your degree is null and void in some shape or form.
Yeah, I mean...
You might have done 95% of it, but then nicked 5% from somewhere.
Yes, yeah, I mean, I think there's about 188, I think, passages which resemble either another student's work or another scholar.
That's quite a lot.
So that's quite a lot. But in a PhD, I mean, I don't know how much that 188, whether that's just a sentence like for like, or whether it's a whole paragraph or pages of, thesis.
Or all of it.
Or all of it. 188 pages. You're right, it does seem an awful lot.
It does seem a lot, doesn't it?
But there's questions for the institutions as well. I mean, he is obviously the one put himself forward to say, I couldn't read or write until I was 18, and therefore I've been this huge academic sort of discovery and gone on to do a PhD, and I'm the best in the world for as he was described by that Cambridge professor. But the institutions themselves have got a lot to answer for. Why didn't they do the background checks? You can't just, well, in my case, you can just bowl up here, I suppose, and say, I'm a commentator.
We did nothing on Charlie.
I'm a commentator, and no one checks at all.
Apparently, he was an advisor to Michael Gove. Interesting. I bumped into Michael at the weekend. Never heard of Charlie.
Not a clue.
No, hello, sorry, it doesn't mean anything to me, he said. Nothing at all?
Well, you know, I'm the only Charlie that was needed, I think, in that office. But you're right, people in these institutions, Cambridge didn't challenge. They didn't ask the questions. They didn't think, they just, because of the wokery, because of the DEI, pushed that institutions like Cambridge and other universities would have had. They just accepted this and thought, God, this is a godsend. You know,
and
all
the other fluff around the CV, I know we're kind of going over old ground here, but all the other stuff, the raising money for charity, in the face of adversity because of his health and neurodivergence and all of this kind of added to the, it put more icing on the cake of this amazing story. Not only is he, as his boss said, and we played the clip last week, I think you were here when we played that clip of him meeting the boss, you are the best in the world, she said.
We're so lucky to have you.
We're so lucky to have you. And it was compounded by all that extra fluff that was added on there as well. I don't know where that story goes, but in the sense of the hiring of the guy. Did get a few people at the weekend saying, it might be an idea if the media left off this guy a bit now, because job's been done, he's been exposed, he's got questions to answer, but you then get into potentially dicey territory.
Yes, yeah. I mean, you're absolutely right. Yeah, you can't.
There is something in that. I don't want to sound woke myself, but there is something in that. Like, how much of a pounding do you give a person?
Yeah, well, depending if you're back to the jousting at the week, the reenactment.
That's very true. Yes, medieval combat.
Maybe that's what he was doing, this professor, reenacting. Maybe this was his...
It was well, did you make the point that it was, or was it somebody else? Maybe he was doing a kind of a creative arts investigation, and this was all a ruse, and he was seeing how far he could get with it.
Well, very creative.
Very creative indeed, imaginative and utter BS, as it turned out. Charlie, thank you very much indeed. You are back later in the week, of course.
Pleasure. Thank you. Oh, I hope
you
so.
said that like it was a surprise. Am I? Really? Oh, very kind of you. I know it's not normal. More from you on the way. 0344 499 1000. This is Talk.
The entire city is being overwhelmed, and there are people who bear direct responsibility. Those responsible are the national government, led by Pedro Sanchez, and his ministers, as well as Mr. Marlaska.
Thousands are just invading the country, and what that is weak law, bad management, but very liberal law. They passed a couple of laws. And people read, people are smart. They read from other countries, and they swam that 3-mile sweat law, however they got in, but nobody's seen anything like it. That will look good compared to what's going to happen to the United States. The biggest thing, the worst thing that Biden did is allowing 25 million people into our country.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Yeah, good morning. Monday, 10th of August. It's Kyle Collins in for Kyle. For the remainder of this week, it is the ultimate breakfast briefing and the home of common sense. So Andy Burnham's going to start his national tour today. He's going to hear people's concerns over the cost of living. The PM will spend much of the rest of August in, quote, listening mode. I keep saying this. It's not an optional extra to be in listening mode as Prime Minister. You should be doing that all the time, Mr. Burnham. He's travelling across the country. It's going to be interesting. If Andy shows up at your front door, what would you like to tell him? Serious question. 0344 499 1000. One area that he doesn't like to talk about, of course, is immigration, which is a bit tricky, specifically because a survey is out today showing that Brits have become even more angry about immigration in the last 10 years. 43% of people, this is a YouGov poll, say that immigration has mostly been bad for the UK. There's other factors in that survey. That is up a whopping 10% in just under 10 years. So there is anger out there. Immigration feeds in specifically to the cost of living crisis. Will Andy Burnham mention this? Don't hold your breath. And who is he going to be meeting, by the way? A lot of people making the point that will he just go to Labour areas? And if he wants to stay silent on prison places, on that, what about prison places? This story is growing bigger by the day. We hear that today that many of those released early, they've crunched the numbers, will go on to commit more crimes. 90,000 crimes, to be more specific. What's he going to do about that? And not only do we have the diabolical possibility of the killers of PC Andrew Harper being released early, we've now been told that 3 terrorists who plotted to blow up planes, potentially killing hundreds, could be freed within weeks. The Al-Qaeda trio were jailed back in 2010. And what do you do to unwind? Apparently, there's a growing trend for reenactment. This is a thing where people dress up as knights and cavaliers and roundheads and the stuff, jump on a horse and do a bit of jousting, or medieval combat, which is sort of next level. Some folk love a bit of armoured role play, it seems. It feeds into a wider question about unusual hobbies and pastimes, whether it's you, someone in the family, or somebody you work with. We'd love the stories. 0344 499 1000. Drop us a voice note on that as well, or message 87222. 7:05. Let's go to word with Ben Habib, chairman of the Great British PAC. Morning, Ben.
Morning, Ian.
Always good to have you with us.
Good to see you.
So Andy Burnham is on a tour. He's a whistle-stop tour. He's not just nipping up to Wigan and having a chinwag. He's doing a whole week of this, Ben, trying to gauge people's concerns specifically about the cost of living crisis. Of course, he has no wiggle room to do much about it. What do you think he's going to achieve with this?
Well, it's like so much with politics, as it has been over the last decade, and no doubt will continue to be. It's performative. It's giving the impression that he cares, giving the impression that he wants to be in touch with the people, and he's going to go around and press flesh and get lots of photo ops, and actually nothing substantial will come of it. Frankly, you know, if he doesn't know what the issues are that are troubling the average Brit at the moment, he should never put his hat in the ring to be Prime Minister. I think the issues are pretty clear to all of us, aren't they? He should now be presenting the solutions. You have to lead. You know, there's no point going around glad-handing people, claiming that you're trying to find out what the issues are. You've actually got to lead. These are the solutions I have for the country. That's why I wanted to be Prime Minister. This is it. This is how we're going to save the country. Yeah. That's what he needs to be getting on with.
Yeah, well, you'd think so. And I do wonder sometimes who's advising people like Andy Burnham, because, yeah, OK, on paper, the Prime Minister's going to go out on a bus. I assume he loves a bus. He's going to visit different places over the and to listen to people. Now, that makes, you know, that sounds like a good thing to do. But as you rightly said, if you have to do this to gauge what are the fundamental concerns of ordinary Brits, then something's already wrong.
Absolutely. And I think just you've shown a clip of him greeting 3 ladies at some event. I mean, the faux warmth with which he shakes their hands and hugs them, it's all just nonsense.
Yeah.
It's like the country's going down the tubes, and this guy thinks that just being all warm and cuddly is somehow going to save us. It ain't going to cut mustard. We need some pretty tough medicine, the country does, to pull itself up by its bootstraps and get going again.
Yeah, and I said this before. I was reminded, Ben, you will remember this well, of back in 2010 when Gordon Brown had that horrendous moment with Gillian Duffy, and he was recorded on a microphone after she'd raised the issue of immigration. And of course, she was a lifelong Labour voter as well, which made it even more interesting. And he referred to her as a bigoted woman. And I was listening to something on a podcast that was reliving this moment, and one of the journalists was saying, look, every time they spoke to one of the insiders at Downing, you know, Brown advisors or senior ministers, they said, Gordon just won't go there with immigration. He doesn't want to talk about it. He won't accept the numbers. And he had Labour advisors around him, Ben, saying, Prime Minister, you know, it's not about racism, it's about numbers. You've got people whose towns are increasing in population by 5,000 or 10,000. That requires considerations on housing and facilities and schools and medical establishments and doctors' surgeries, all of that. He couldn't go there. He just couldn't step over that line. It wasn't in his DNA, and I sense, Ben, that Andy Burnham is made of exactly the same stuff.
100%. I mean, the predominant ideology that underpins these people and has done, I think, virtually all senior politicians, including ones from the Conservative Party, is one of globalism, internationalism, a lack of preparedness to understand that British people must be put first.
Yeah.
And so they regard all of humanity, whether it's foreign or British citizens, as being equal. And so they can't countenance a debate which might seek to put British interests first because it goes against their fundamental belief system.
Yeah.
And it makes them, very ill-equipped to be Prime Minister of this country, because as much as they may wish to care about people from Pakistan and Syria and North Africa, actually their obligation is to us, the British people, and we want our interests protected and promoted, and they won't do it. And the left has been really clever. I don't need to say this. Every single viewer and listener knows this already, but the left have been very clever conflating concerns about immigration with racism. They're completely two different things. Immigration, it doesn't matter where it's coming from. No country can cope with the kind of immigration that we've had to experience, particularly if it comes from countries, of course, that have ideologies and systems and belief and values, etc., that are antithetical to our own.
Absolutely.
But full stop, we can't cope with the numbers coming in.
And even if, I'm just trying to think of what the average person might say to the Prime Minister if, he stops or knocks on their door. They will talk about the fact that the rent is too high, that the energy bills are off the scale. Going for food is, buying food is ridiculous. Going out for food is another league of insanity. These are all things I don't think he can do anything about, Ben. I mean, taking a couple of pence off the VAT of an energy bill doesn't touch the sides. He's got no wiggle room.
No, but I think if they were to ditch net zero, for example, that would, at its very heart, reduce the initial cost of energy, which is increased by around 40%, because it's all set by reference to fossil fuels and the surcharges that they then put on fossil fuels. So that would reduce fundamental energy bills by 40%. Yeah. That would go a long, long way to sorting out the nation's problems. But again, they won't do it because they're hooked on this ideology of the world burning up by 2050 if they haven't completely destroyed our economy on the way.
Indeed.
And he talks about the need to reindustrialize the United Kingdom. Of course, we all recognize that need. But if you're practicing net zero and you want to reduce carbon emissions, you therefore end up what we've done, exporting our industry to other parts of the globe, India, China, etc. And then we buy it back, enriching their economies, diminishing our economy, giving away our foreign exchange, etc. It's a completely daft set of policies that we've been governing the country by over the last 20, 30 years.
Absolutely.
30 years.
Sean in Bridlington, Ben, says, I can guarantee that Burnham won't be visiting Clacton, Piddington or Crowborough on his listening tour. Yes, I don't imagine many people have pointed out that, Downing Street don't just, when representing Andy Burnham, are not just going to randomly turn up at different towns. This would have been carefully, one would assume, carefully choreographed to hit all the sweet spots.
Yeah, it's all for the photo shoot, isn't it? It's all for the 24-hour news cycle.
Yeah.
And that's what these trips are for. Even now, you're playing a clip of him at a cabinet meeting, all laughing and happy and on his front foot. It's all nonsense. He should be blooming morose and depressed at a cabinet meeting because of the subjects he has to deal with. Yeah. He should be dealing with stuff, not getting cameras into a cabinet meeting. I mean, for goodness sake, the people are not stupid. We want stuff done. We don't want any more of this performative nonsense. We want action. We want solutions. And he's not providing anything. I mean, the idea that by cutting, some business rates on pubs, he's going to kickstart the economy, forget it.
Yeah.
I think it was £1,000 a year that he cut off the bills for pubs. And he cut off 45 pence a week off our electricity bills. None of this is going to touch the size of the problem. None of it.
Absolutely right. And again, just to come back to that issue of immigration, I mentioned that YouGov poll that says over 40%, I think 43% of people said in that poll that immigration was mostly bad for Britain. That's increased. So this is not just, this is a YouGov poll. They've looked at this. There's also other fairly disturbing stats that come out of it. So the headlines are all there. for the Prime Minister to act. It took him 2 weeks to even reference small boats, and even when he did, he sort of tried on behalf of the Labour Party to claim some kind of victory, that it was a policy they'd put into place that had shown a mild reduction. He's got to find a way, surely. I mean, if he does call an early election, I don't know if he will, but if he does, then he's got to find a way to, even if it was socialist smoke and mirrors, I don't know. He's got to somehow address this, hasn't he? He's got to, you know, he talks about being on the side of working people, being understanding of the issues that concern people. How much longer can he swerve this?
Well, it's not going to go on for long. I think the minute we get a budget out of this new Prime Minister and the new Chancellor, reality is going to hit home with those who think Burnham deserves a bounce.
Yeah.
And I think they're going to burn Burnham pretty quickly. You talked about immigration, his lack of understanding of it, of the issue and the importance of it in the British people's minds. He went to the White Cliffs of Dover the other day, I'm sure you remember, Ian, and he talked about the need to control illegal migration by increasing the number of safe routes. No one in this country is suggesting the number of safe routes are inadequate. We just want it all to stop.
Yeah.
And that doesn't make us xenophobic or racist. That just means we want our country to stop changing in the dramatic way that it is changing, and our economy being undermined by importing people actually largely without any skill. Immigration used to be a mechanism by which you got highly educated people, very capable businessmen, academics, and so on, coming to the country for a short period of time under a visa system to help the British economy. Now it has become a means by which we import the third world to turn our first world economy into a third world one and destroy our culture or route to that achievement. It is completely balmy.
Yeah. A couple of stories on prisons, because we know we are running out of space fast. Opposition parties to Labour, the Conservatives, they've looked at analysis on this and said that Labour's early release policy could result in nearly 90,000 additional offences. These are people that are released and then they just reoffend again because it's within them, because they're not rehabilitated and they don't much care if they go to jail, whatever. I mean, we should take that seriously if that is the case. We know that the recidivism rate is high, and going back to prison is obviously, shows the entire policy of early release is completely dysfunctional.
Yeah, well, I mean, it stands out. I don't know why we needed a survey or an analysis. The likely, you know, if you're going to release violent prisoners back into society, they're going to commit violent crime. If you release thieves back into society, they'll thieve again. The whole point about the criminal justice system is to identify those who've broken the law, are likely to break the law again, and incarcerate them. And we've got a broken criminal justice system. I see that Reform is considering sending people to foreign criminals to El Salvador. Well, I say send the whole blooming lot to El Salvador. Why are we keeping British citizens here? Why do British prisoners here? Send the whole blooming lot. If we haven't got spaces here, send the whole lot to another country and incarcerate them. They've broken the law. They've broken the sacred contract which allows communities and societies to go about peacefully doing their business. These people don't deserve the sympathy of the state. They deserve the book thrown at them. And our criminal justice system, frankly, is another massive symptom of the breakdown of governance of this country. And we've got to start being very, very tough about it.
Spot on. Ben, great to have you on. We'll speak again very soon. Ben Habib, chairman of the Great British PAC. Thank you to him. Over to you on all of that. 0344 499 1000. One here from Peter says, Ben Habib is wrong. The government do not treat British people as equal anymore. No, I think Ben's point is, yes, you're right. They should be treating people as equal. It's almost a game of, in politics now, what you can kind of get away with. And Andy Burnham is obviously consistently addressing this left-wing group that slightly includes some Lib Dems, but mostly that Corbynite part of his own party. He's also trying to hoover up the Greens as well. So there's issues in all of that. Are we pausing here, Dean, for a second? We've got a short pause and then we're back talking to Mark Littlewood in just a second, Director of Popular Conservatism, on these big issues. Thoughts on this? 0344 499 1000. This is Talk.
fact they're being released after 6 years is a slap in the face for the family. It's a slap in the face for you and all of Andrew's colleagues as well, isn't it?
Yeah, it's more than a slap in the face. Quite honestly, it's rubbing salt in wounds that have never healed from 7 years ago. And the thing with this news that we've got today is there's no deterrent that I see for individuals who commit these heinous crimes, and particularly who take an officer's life in the execution of their duty.
Okay. On DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
One here from David in Louth, who says, Ian, my wife has just pointed out that if it was a criminal offence to lie on your CV, then half the Labour Party would be in court. That's a very, a very fair point, isn't it? And Brian says, Ian, the reference to the Cambridge professor, there was a film starring Piers Brosnan about a real-life Englishman faker who pretended to be a Native American in Canada. The film was called Grey Owl. That's a great premise. I hope it's... I might watch that today. I love the idea of that. Was it any good, though, Brian? That's what I'd like to know. Jeff says, morning, gents. I'm sorry, but no. Why should we pay for illegals, period? Send them back and force the countries they came from to take them back. We need to get tough with these governments. And certainly when it comes to what we do with prisoners, foreign prisoners, 10,000 of those people. A lot of them are, I think, disproportionately Albanians, I think, form the biggest number. Why is that beyond the wit of this government to say, right, every single one of those people is going to go back to Albania? Why would that be an ECHR problem or any other problem for that matter? Let's get a word on all the big stories. Mark Littlewood is with us, Director of Popular Conservatism UK. Mark, morning to you.
Morning, Ian. Good to be with you.
Yeah, and what a great week as well. Andy Burnham's on a tour. He's going to make life even better since he took office. He's off there. I don't know whether he's going on a bus. I wouldn't mind betting he does in some shape or form. It only cost him £2 for a journey. And he's going to go and he's going to test the pulse of the nation and ask people about their concerns on the cost of living.
Yeah. I'm not holding my breath that he's going to come up with anything particularly exciting, Ian, because you just need to sort of crunch the numbers. If you sort of break down the cost of living for a typical British household, the big items are rent. Yep. But for a good number of households, your biggest cost of living item isn't your weekly shop at the supermarket or your electricity bill. It's tax. Tax is the biggest cost of living for most people. Yep. So if Andy Burnham is keen to ease the cost of living, make life a little bit easier for the average person, for the average household, I'm extremely keen to hear what he's going to do to lower the tax burden.
Well, that's
so far he's been silent on that.
Correct, and the bit that I can't work out with this is, he's already come up with a couple of things about bus fares and VAT from your energy bill. There's lots of big questions as how even those very small things, which are not massive benefits to most people, great, better than nothing, we all get that. But he's come under the cosh because, of course, he's got to fund these things. So if he comes back with a list of 20 bullet points, Mark, from people saying this is a problem, that's a problem, it's the energy bills, it's the rent, it's the tax, what's he going to do about it?
Well, that is a very good question, Ian, because you're right. The Burnham administration so far has been more or less sort of tossing around a whole range of policy proposals, which you might love, you might loathe, you might be indifferent about, such as the bus fare thing, such as this plan to slightly lower business rates on pubs and restaurants. They're all quite small ball things. It's a few million here, a few tens of millions there, but he's given no indication of how they're going to be paid for, because from what I can gather, he's given no indication whatsoever of any area of government expenditure that he's going to meaningfully cut. If he was actually able to identify some government programmes that he was going to close down or some serious belt tightening in some big areas of spending, OK, now you've got a little bit of room to breathe. Now you can find some taxes that you could cut in order to help businesses and individual people. But remarkable silence so far from the new government on areas of government expenditure and waste that they think they can do away with. And we've got a colossal budget deficit, Ian. You know, we're spending money like it's going out of fashion. You would have thought that if you want to get, you know, the cost of living under some sort of control, to ease that pressure on families, why not start by identifying big chunks of government expenditure that are going to go, programs that are going to be closed down, and then say, right, we've got 10, 20, 30, 40 billion to potentially play with here in order to lower taxes and ease the burden on people. But it doesn't seem to be thought of in that way. It seems to be much more along the lines of, let's have a gimmicky new announcement every day or two.
Yeah, and one area, of course, that is a big concern to people, I know this is, Mr Burnham would argue, well, it's not really what he's doing on this tour, it's about the cost of living. But the area that we know is absolutely pivotal, top of the tree for most people, is immigration. Yeah. I would argue, I think financially, the burden of that is massive. It does feed into the cost of living crisis. Andy Burnham, we can almost guarantee, will not talk about this at all this week.
Yes, that's right. I mean, again, near silence on this from our new Prime Minister, both in the build-up to him becoming Prime Minister and since. He did make, you know, one fleeting visit to the White Cliffs of Dover, didn't he, in which he said, we've got to get a grip on this. Well, how are you going to get a grip on this?
Correct.
The truth about the immigration issue is you've got to change the law. I mean, I dare say you can do things to improve the efficiency of border force, for example, but mainly you've actually got to change the incentive effects of people coming in. And you almost certainly, you were mentioning just before the break, Ian, you know, need to take a view of what we're going to do with foreign prisoners, whether we need to leave the ECHR, that's the European Convention of Human Rights, and repeal the Human Rights Act, or at least large chunks of it, in order to make it easier to get people out of the country if we don't consider their presence here desirable. Again, the silence is deafening here. There doesn't seem to be any legal changes, not really any changes to sort of the tax system as well. I mean, I want a pretty clear rule. We're not interested in having you as an immigrant into this country unless you're going to be a net contributor to the exchequer. That should be the sort of rule. But again, no even sketch of a plan from the Burnham administration. So I think we can assume from that the current problems will persist, because you need a radical overhaul here.
Absolutely, and much like all of his predecessors, and it really does get exposed when stories become this serious about immigration, whether it's immigration across the Channel, which obviously visually that's a big one, but we know that in the grander scale it forms actually a smaller percentage into the bigger picture of immigration, legal or otherwise. He's never going to get animated about this, Mark, and I find this devastating that, you know, you don't have to be a mad racist to be concerned about immigration. There's economic concerns about immigration. There's a basic fairness about immigration. There's practicalities on space, on housing. You couldn't get Gordon Brown to talk about it. We were discussing that a little while back when, you know, he had that moment in the back of a car talking about a bigoted woman back in 2010. And all the smart money at the time, and we now know, his advisors around him were saying, Gordon, you've got to talk about this. And he just wouldn't talk about it. He wouldn't go there because he felt he was so uncomfortable to even approach it. And I sense that Andy Burnham is in exactly that place.
All the evidence suggests that, doesn't it, Ian, that this is just an area he doesn't want to go to. And that's because what he's sort of attempting to do, and he can on occasions be a rather charming man, I think, our new Prime Minister, but what he's attempting to do is just to spread memes and vibes of hopey, changey stuff, right? It's all about how everything's going to get a lot easier. He's not really pointing to any colossal problems that he wants to solve, and immigration is definitely in that bucket. So I think you're right. I mean, they are pointing to the fact that the numbers are down, but you would expect year on year, all things equal, the numbers to be down because the people who can get here most easily have already arrived. Okay?
Well, that's
so
true.
It's unlikely that we're going to have sort of 20 years of it continuing to go up. But yeah, it seems to be a hear no evil, speak no evil type approach to the whole immigration problem. Having Shabana Mahmood retained as Home Secretary, some people were saying, well, that's evidence that the Labour government's going to get tough. But again, very, very little information about what she is intending to do to improve things. And it's all at the sort of administrative level of better enforcement and all the rest of it. We're not hearing much anymore about smashing the gangs, are we? I don't know how many gangs have been smashed since the last general election. Not very many by my count, possibly zero. and they don't seem able or willing, and probably couldn't get it through their own backbenchers if they wanted to take a much more robust position on this and actually change the law, which is the necessary thing. At the moment, the business model for Britain, Ian, is basically we are going to export our millionaires. More millionaires are fleeing the country than for virtually any other country in the world, and we're going to import welfare claimants from the rest of the world. Well, that isn't a very sustainable business model. You need to solve both of those problems, but again, the government seems clueless about how to even tackle an element of either of them.
He must. I mean, of all the, Andy Burnham's a lot of things. He's not stupid. Okay, Keir Starmer wasn't stupid. They must know this stuff. They must. There's advisors around them that are partisan who are there just to say, "Look, Prime Minister, this is the reality. You've got to do something about it." When he quoted, when he went to the White Cliffs of Dover, he had his sort of Vera Lynn moment down there. There was a. He said, the numbers are coming down, so our plan is working. It's like, well, you rightly said, Mark, that nothing to do with their plan working. And in fact, numbers coming into Europe as a whole are down. This isn't some brilliance of Keir Starmer or Shabana Mahmood or Yvette Cooper before her that has made these numbers drop. There's a blip at the moment, they're down. Fundamentally, he knows the problems, but won't say anything about it. And it does feed into the cost of living crisis. If you look at all of it, whether it's students overstaying visas, whether it's people who've come here through the Boris wave, whoever. I mean, we have an awful lot of people living among us who really should not be in this country.
Yeah, that's exactly right. My suspicion in terms of why he isn't taking a more robust approach on this, or indeed anything that even resembles an approach at all, is that he knows, and quite possibly his advisors have told him, that this is touching the third rail of politics for much of the left. And if you're seeking to keep your left-leaning backbenchers on side, or appealing to people who are perhaps flirting with the Green Party, you want to get them back to Labour's banner rather than voting for Polanski, then it's going to be damn near impossible to do anything serious and significant. You probably won't be able to pilot it through Parliament, although Labour has a very large majority. The Labour backbenchers showed quite clearly under Keir Starmer that they are willing to rebel in meaningful numbers. That made it impossible for the last administration to even touch the welfare bill. And I would imagine that Andy Burnham has looked at the numbers, gone through the list, and thinks that if he were to come up with a robust plan about immigration, he would face a very big backbench rebellion. He would give succour to the even more left-wing parties than Labour, such as the Green Party. And therefore, the strategy, such as there is one, is to cross your fingers, hope and pray, rather than to actually do anything. Very, very unsatisfactory for the country as a whole, Ian, but potentially an understandable position for Andy Burnham, given the political and ideological makeup of his own political party.
I think it is absolutely that. I think the calculations are he doesn't need to go there, and there's more there's more to be gained by appeasing that contingent on the left and the floating sort of Green Labour lot, the Corbynite lot. Play to that gallery. Don't try and play to the Reform gallery.
Yeah. Yes, I think that's the decision he's taken. Yeah. And it's a great disappointment because, the whole immigration issue and what we're going to do about it is, is it the top or is it just equal with the economy or is it just behind the economy? But one of the great looming issues and a clearly very substantial structural problem facing Britain. Yep. And we have a government that emphatically isn't going to tackle it, which means that when we finally, at some point in the future, get a government that's going to be serious on this issue, it's not just going to be stopping the flow, Ian. What the hell are we going to do about all of the people who have presently arrived and are not pulling their weight? So each passing year, if you like, the problem of stock gets worse. The total balance of people who are here, even if you could immediately stop every small boat crossing, every illegal entry into the country, you still have a mammoth problem on your hands to unravel everything that's happened over the past 10 years.
Absolutely.
And we're going to get at least 3 more years of that. I don't think there'll be an early election. I don't think this problem is going to be gripped. We're at the mercy of international events rather than trying to control our own destiny. Many more thousand immigrants who, in a sensible, rational world we wouldn't necessarily want on these shores, are going to be coming in. And Andy Burnham's going to hope we don't notice. I think he's going to find that forlorn hope.
There's a lot of finger crossing going on at Downing Street. Mark, thank you. Mark Littlewood is Director of Popular Conservatism UK. If you stopped all the boat crossings tomorrow, you've still got tens and tens of thousands, probably hundreds of thousands, that are stuffed in hotels and camps and goodness knows where else. Let's speak with Alex Burkhardt, MP, Shadow Chancellor of the Duchy of Lancaster. Alex, good morning to you. Can we start on prison release? I know that the Conservatives sort of looked at some of the numbers and the sort of perhaps the short-term nature of prison release, given the amount of prisoners that are expected to be back where they came from fairly soon. Tens of thousands, 90,000 I think it is, of prisoners that could be back in the slammer not long after being released from the slammer. Good morning.
Yeah. Morning. Thanks for having me on. Look, the whole thing's a total mess. We're seeing people who should never be released from prison before they finish their term going out into being released into the public under Labour's plans. And there are alternatives, right? Nick Timothy, our Shadow Justice Secretary, wrote a very good letter to the government the other day, saying that you've got to go abroad, you've got to shop around, you've got to be able to do what I think Sweden's just done with Estonia, where they've got a surplus of prison places, and buy some there. It can be done quickly. And they've got to get on and build faster. They've got to keep replenishing the prison estate. But it's just not acceptable to have clearly very dangerous people being released into the public.
What is the answer to this, then? I mean, there's lots of talk. We've got Reform saying they will send foreign prisoners to El Salvador if they were in government. I don't know what the logistics of that are. But certainly that contingent, just to look at that one story, there's something in this, isn't there? 10,000 foreign prisoners. Many arguing, not unreasonably, Alex, that would be a starting point.
Oh, look, yeah, as I say, Nick Timothy was talking about this the other day, saying that there are countries out there that have surplus prison places, and we should be, Britain should be purchasing those places and sending our prisoners there. You can't. It's very, very difficult to do that whilst you're within the European Convention on Human Rights. So the Conservatives would leave the convention and give us the legal powers to deport a lot of foreign criminals straight away, but also to people who need to be locked up. We can find places elsewhere in the world to do that. So it just requires the government to take a decent, hard-headed, practical approach to this, and not sort of put its head in the sand and say it's all too difficult.
We have the Prime Minister today starting his whistle-stop tour of the country, Alex, it seems. He's in listening mode. Yeah, very exciting. We celebrate deep joy at this end. He's going off to listen to the public and listen to real people, because Andy Burnham's a real normal bloke who likes white bread and pork scratchings and all that stuff. What do you think the purpose of this is? Because even if he does establish people's concerns on the cost of living, the wiggle room he has to deal with this is somewhat limited.
Look, I think in terms of political strategy, what Burnham and his team are trying to do is get through the summer with as much favourable media as they possibly can before they have to come back to Parliament and face the real world, right? Face difficult questions, face up to the big problems that are facing the country, about which we've heard him say nothing so far. You can go around the country talking about the cost of living, that's all very nice, but everything they've announced is either something that's announced a long time ago, or it's something that is just going to make very marginal difference, or a combination of the two. If you want to improve the quality of life for people in this country, if you want to put more money in their pockets, you've got to have an economy that grows. You've got to have an economy in which businesses can hire people without fear of enormous regulation, which is what Angela Rayner's brought in, or without fear of enormous taxation, which is what Rachel Reeves brought in, which it looks very much as though Andy Burnham's going to continue those two policies. The truth is that in our country at the moment, we are spending far too much money. We are taxing people too much. We have growth that is too low. We have unemployment that is too high. And unless Labour really wants to stick its hands into that problem and fix it, we're just going to have more of the same. We're going to have more of the same with some slightly glossier press releases and video clips. But that reality is coming for Andy Burnham and his government. Over the weekend we saw that for the first time in our history, the country is £3 trillion in debt.
Yeah.
Right? £3 trillion in debt. The cost of servicing our debt is now more money than, I think it's about twice the amount of money we spend on defence. This is totally unsustainable. You have to get a grip on the public finances before this ends very badly for all of us.
Final question, Alex Burghardt. Given the lack of wiggle room Mr Burnham has, given the enormity of the problem, if the Conservatives were in power tomorrow, what is the first substantial policy you would put in place to realistically, properly address the cost of living crisis?
So we have to cut public spending so that we can cut people's taxes, and at the same time start to get the national debt down so that the country has some breathing space. So, huge welfare reform, spending far too much money on people who are out of work, people who should be in work. We use those savings first to bring down people's taxes, and second to bring down the national debt so we're not wasting so much money each year on interest payments. Those are the difficult decisions that you have to take in order to get a grip on the economy, in order to give Britain a future.
Alex Burghardt, thank you for your time. Shadow Chancellor of the Duchy of Lancaster. 0344 499 1000. We're going to be speaking to David Shipley in a few moments, investigative journalist, former prisoner himself, so he knows his way around prison stories, that's for sure. Certainly that one on the front page of The Sun, which should disturb us all. Jet bomb plotters free in weeks. We'll tell you more about that too. We'll speak to the journalist that wrote the piece as well. Lots to get on with. 20 to 8, this is Talk.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Welcome back. Coming up on 7:45, loads to get through. We'll talk to David Shipley shortly. Let's get a voice note firstly on Andy Burnham. This comes from Peter. Morning, Pete.
I agree with Ben Habib 100%, except for one thing. The British government do not treat British people as equal anymore. They treat us as second-class citizens. And also, Andy Vermin should not be gallivanting around the country. He should be recalled in Parliament. This country is in dire trouble. Why is there even a parliamentary holiday for over that amount of time? It shouldn't have happened. By the way, I've just looked at Andy Vermin. Is that part in his hair is way down the left-hand side. That's usually when people have got a comb over or a wig. Is that right? Is he actually the man that where you can take the wig off, pull the eyes off, pull the nose off? You know, the one that's there stuck on with Velcro. Oh, I don't know. But all I know is, right, he's another faker.
Is that right? Andy Burnham has an extreme left-wing parting in his hair. And I think, fair to say, it was raised there. Is that his hair? I think it is. He's got a good head of hair. Starmer had a good head of hair, in fairness. Gordon Brown had quite a good head of hair. Is that the only thing the left have to offer? A good head of hair. We'll get a voice note from Dan in just a second. First, this is Ian down in London. Ian, what have you got for us? Hi.
Hi, Ian. Oh, hold on. God, I was getting used to being back here again.
Hold him.
I've just been away on holiday and I've just got back. Nice to hear your voice first thing in the morning.
Oh, that's very kind.
Right. It's unbelievable. Every time I go abroad, whether it's to Spain or this time to Italy, all you hear from whether it's Italians, Swiss, Germans, French, all of that, what is the UK doing letting all these immigrants in? They can't believe it. It's like at the moment there's a massive row going on between Italy and Spain that Italy's putting up the borders to stop it. And Spain saying, well, we won't let your people in.
But then France and Germany don't come out of it very well either.
No, none of them do. And they all, every time you speak to all of them, it's always the same thing. When you walk around, you never actually hear any of the ones that are pro any of it being around. They all seem to hide unless they're doing a pro-Pally march. That's the only time you ever cross them. They just don't really exist.
Yeah.
They just sort of come out when they've got like hundreds or thousands of them together, they feel safe. But none of them will actually say the country is going down the drain.
What does Andy Burnham... So he's going on this tour then, Ian. What's, likely to come of this? Because I get it, all right, as a new Prime Minister, he's going to, obviously ask people, what are your main concerns? Nothing wrong with asking people, predominantly, what are your main concerns? Sounds like he's listening and all the rest of it. And they're going to say, well, my energy bill is too high, taxes are too high, the rent is too high. So, OK, he's listened. What does he do?
Squat diddly.
Yeah.
He won't do absolutely nothing.
Well, he's got no money apart from anything. So even if he wanted to... Look, I don't dispute. I don't think there's any politician that doesn't want people to be better off. Of course, apart from the left don't like successful people being too well off. But generally speaking, yeah, he might come out of it and go, I've heard the concerns and people are very worried. And then what? I mean, that's the problem, isn't it? What's he going to do with this information?
He can do nothing. All he'll say is he'll turn around to his so-called backbenchers, which I don't think he really has, right? And they'll turn around to him and he'll say, I want to cut this. No welfare cuts. It's like, I don't know if it's true or not true. There was one article, something I came across, that now with a blue badge, you're actually going to get, if you've got a blue badge, you're going to get cheaper petrol, or you're going to get a petrol sort of allowance.
Right.
So not only are you going to get a car for nothing if you've got a PIP or anything else like that, you're also going to get extra petrol at a discounted price. So what's that about?
Well, that's very kind of him, but I don't know whether that goes far. I mean, yes, all these little things, what he's clearly trying to do is build up the image of a nice bloke, isn't he?
He is, but basically, when you've got like a sort of second in charge who's actually been caught for doing fraud, you've got others as like that sort of have a real problem with trying to do their taxes right for their properties. Well, wait a minute, it's just really, again, it's just putting paint or like sort of putting a smoke screen in front of people that quite simply he hasn't got a clue.
Yeah. And there's the problem. But we've been talking, Ian, that, and Mark Littlewood raised this point as well, that is he just... Has he crunched the numbers and gone, look, it's the left-wing contingent I need to play to. I can monkey around. You remember when Keir Starmer tried to do a bit of sort of reform for about 2 minutes? And he talked about we're an island of strangers and all this kind of stuff, and the left absolutely lost the plot over this. It was seen as a terrible thing to say about, an immigration point, an island of strangers. I actually thought it was very spot on what he said. It was probably the one good thing he did say during his short time as Prime Minister. But then they left it alone and they thought that there's no point. And now Andy Burnham, I think, is going the full... That they believe that the number of votes required for further success of an Andy Burnham government you're never going to get the Reform voters anyway. You might get the odd Tory, but probably not. So play to your own gallery, and he believes there's more of them than there is of us, Ian.
That's right. But the funniest thing is, you had a defence minister who resigned because there wasn't more money for the armed forces.
Yes.
Yeah? He's now become the Chancellor of the Exchequer.
Yeah.
And there's not been a word out of his mouth to say that he's going to find the money to give the money for the defence.
Well, he's got his budget coming up in October. Do you think that's when he's going to spread the joy?
Oh, no. And you've got a defence minister who really doesn't have a clue about defence, and he's sort of blaming everybody under the sun for doing things that he doesn't realise. It's just absolutely, talk about, what is it, round pegs in square holes or whatever.
So it's all of that. It's all of that. Listen, Ian, I've got to move, but you've been great as ever. Thank you. Ian down in London. Let's get a word with David Shipley, investigative journalist, particularly on crime and justice issues. David, good morning to you.
Morning, Ian.
Nice to have you with us. A couple of stories here. I just want to start with this Conservative analysis that has looked at some of the numbers of those being released, and their projection, if that's the right way to phrase it, is that potentially 90,000 of those people that get released are back in jail fairly shortly afterwards anyway.
Yeah, they are. I mean, we hit a really grim milestone earlier this year where for the first time ever in the first half of the year, more people were recalled to prison than were released.
Wow.
And just to put that in context, if you go back 12, 13 years, that ratio was 1 to 5. So for every one person recalled to prison, 5 were being released. Something's gone catastrophically wrong with the whole justice system.
How do we address this? I mean, is this about early release specifically, or is this just about people who were released at the time they're meant to go, that they're on a conveyor belt, they just come straight back in?
It's more like the latter. I mean, I think it's a few things. The problem we've got is that the whole system is broken. So it's not just prison. So probation are really, really struggling as well. In fact, I had a piece on the probation service in the paper yesterday talking about the fact that the probation union are now saying that the government's early release scheme is going to cause women to be killed because there's just not the capacity in the system to manage even the people who are currently being released, let alone more. Policing has huge constraints as well. We're seeing that they're failing to supervise very dangerous men in the community, and there's sort of no capacity anywhere. So it's almost a perfect storm for the government, I think, and one which is going to lead to more and more serious crimes which could have been prevented.
What about the ongoing issue, we've talked about it before, David, of foreign prisoners? What do we do here? Because you've got Nigel Farage talking about if he was Prime Minister, he would immediately hold talks with El Salvador. And we've probably all seen some of those prison documentaries of what an El Salvador prison looks like. Not a particularly pleasant place, but it may well appeal to their government to have a sweetener their end, cheaper than keeping them in our prisons, 10,000 there already. That would be Nigel Farage's or his government, one of his first ports of call, to look to foreign prisons for foreign criminals.
Well, it's not actually only Reform who've suggested that. I think it was Labour last year who were mooting the idea that maybe they could look at renting space in other prisons. It could help. You know, I think we do have a sizable number of foreign national prisoners in our prisons, and deporting them back to their home countries is ideal. I think it's probably more sellable to the British public to say we're going to put the foreign nationals in a rubbish, unpleasant jail in El Salvador, because there's probably less concern about them than there are about, native Brit criminals. So I think it's potentially doable. I think the other thing is we just need more capacity. One of the other stories around this weekend is that the prison building program is just not functioning. So I think everyone knows over their 14 years in office, the Tories added about 500 places. It seems that Labour thus far have only added a few hundred places. The big prison builds are struggling. One of them they're also trying to build next to a number of other prisons which can't get enough staff anyway. So I'm not sure how that's going to work. They need to just actually get Parliament to legislate to say this prison is being built here. Planning law doesn't exist. There needs to be a real effort to change things and grasp it.
So there are prisons being built, David, that are what, midway, nearly there? What's the deal with that?
Well, if you look on the National Infrastructure Authority's big dashboard they're showing that all of the prison programme big building projects are either in amber or red. And red means it's probably not going to happen, and amber means it faces serious issues. There's a combination of planning issues. One of the big contractors collapsed some time ago. I think that's caused problems. And also, as I said, there's the issue where they're not really putting some prisons in the right place. They're building a big new prison near Aylesbury, where we've got Grendon and Spring Hill already. Those prisons can't hire enough officers locally. Yeah. There just isn't the workforce there. So adding another 1,500 capacity prison, which of course requires hundreds of staff, is only going to make that worse. So there's just the combination, I think, of bad planning by the state, planning law, and businesses collapsing, this sort of thing.
Yeah. In terms of people that shouldn't be let out of prison, we know the story of PC Andrew Harper is making a lot of headlines, and the Police Federation, certainly last week we spoke to Thames Valley Police Federation, they were talking about taking the government to court if this wasn't addressed and these killers are not released early. I think the National Police Federation have now got in on this as well and said we will also campaign very hard. And then there's another set of prisoners. We read today, front page of The Sun, jet bomb plotters free within weeks. 3 terrorists who plotted to kill thousands by blowing up planes with liquid bombs could be free in weeks after launching their parole bids. Now, this isn't part of the early release, as I understand it, but just briefly, if you could, on this, David, where do we go with this? They're entitled to parole, as repugnant as that might be, but should Andy Burnham be stepping in on this one as well?
I mean, I think currently what Andy Burnham is saying, what seems to be getting briefed, is that he can't really do anything because, he can't make changes for specific people in prison. Yeah. But he can, right? If Parliament really wants to, if Andy Burnham really wants to, he could pass a specific law saying that these 3 men aren't going to be released, actually. And I think we probably need to recognise that some of the sentencing decisions that were taken, in the early 2000s, I think particularly for terrorism cases, were not robust enough. Yeah. Men who have plotted to do this sort of thing should obviously never be released. They will very clearly always pose a threat. It's suicidal as a society to let men like this free.
David, on that point, thank you. Always great to gauge your views on these things. We'll speak again, I'm sure, throughout the course of this week. That is David Shipley, investigative journalist on crime and justice issues. Thank you to him. Let's get a voice note on Andy Burnham. This comes from Dan. Morning, Dan.
Morning, Ian. It's Dan from Kent. I had a knock on my door and I opened it, and Andy Burnham's standing there, and I go, just the man. Come on in. I want to show you something. I'll take him into the room. That room with a big giant elephant in it. I'd say, see that, Andy? That's high welfare bills. That's immigration out of control. That's alarm clock Britain being crippled with high taxes. Sort it out. I'm not worried about what you call a bread roll or a few lines from a Smiths song or what colour bus you like. Sort the problems out of this country. Do you really want to go down in history as another failed Prime Minister?
A week now spent learning the detailed ropes and the administration and all the problems that will face him a month or 6 weeks later on when events in the Commons, events elsewhere start hitting him. So I think he will come to regret it. I understand it's not just been in a job for a fortnight. He's fought an exhausting by-election. He was Mayor of Greater Manchester. So I understand why he's gone, but I just think practically he is making a mistake.
Secretary has brought forward a very rigorous plan in relation to this, and let's remember, of course, the numbers can fluctuate, but overall boat crossings are down quite significantly year on year, so that does suggest that the plan is working.
We've just witnessed drone footage of the French authorities handing out life jackets to illegal immigrants and then waving them goodbye as they head on their way towards the UK. So the French are actively helping and facilitating illegal immigration. In addition to that, the French forces did nothing to stop that huge migrant dinghy. In fact, the dinghy came out, then it went back to the beach to pick up even more illegal immigrants and then departed for a second time. During all of that, the French did nothing, and they even handed out life jackets and waved goodbye as these illegal immigrants head towards the UK. I think that's terrible. I mean that anyone who did cross the channel and arrive in Dover could be immediately deported within around about a week.
Give that a second, he's just dragging a line by the look of it.
Is that a warning shot towards us? I don't know.
Well, I was trying to work it out.
Okay. The French officers could clearly see we were conducting an interview on the back of the fishing boat. They sailed extremely close to us and started firing gunshots, 11 live rounds. We could see the bullets hitting the water behind our boat. They weren't firing before their approach. They weren't firing afterwards. There was no notification of any kind of training exercise. So it did seem to me to be an effort to intimidate us.
The thing that I find, and I should say alarm clock Brits find so frustrating, Chris, and this is why I wanted you on this morning. Yesterday, finally, the unelected Messiah of Manchester stood up and said, to consummate fury from most of us, that Labour's plan to stop dinghy migrants is working. This, Chris, despite the fact that 1,000 illegal migrants have still come into this country in the last 9 days since he became Prime Minister.
Je suis un député dans le Parlement du Royaume-Uni. Why have you allowed the migrants into the water? Why haven't you stopped them?
Our order is to let them go like that.
Your order is to let them go?
We just have to say to them, don't do that, it's dangerous.
So your orders are not to intervene?
We have to protect them.
Well, there's also protecting the border as well.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
And good morning. Welcome. It's Collins in for Kyle for the remainder of this week. Monday, 10th of August, a beautiful summer's day ahead of us in most parts of the UK. Unless you live in Lerwick in the Shetlands, then it's still that stubborn 14 degrees every day. You can set your clock by it. But it's an exciting day, regardless of where you are. Andy Burnham starting a national tour of the UK to listen to people's concerns over the cost of living. What a nice man. The Prime Minister will spend much of the rest of August, I love this, this is the official statement from Downing Street, in listening mode. I mean, that is not an optional extra, Prime Minister. That is your kind of default position should always be in listening mode. He's travelling around the UK to gauge people's concerns about the cost of living. I mean, there's so much to unpack on that one. If he knocks at your front door, I don't know whether he's going to be doing knocking or just sort of town centre stuff or pressing the flesh at the community centre and the old folks home like he likes to do. I don't know which way round it or how this is going to manifest. Either way, if he knocks on your front door, what would you like to tell Andy Burnham? And you can throw anything in that one as well. 0344 499 1000. One area he doesn't like to talk about, of course, is immigration, which is a bit tricky, particularly today, as a survey shows that Brits have become more fed up and angry about immigration than ever before. 43% of people say immigration has been mostly bad for the UK. That's up 10% on the last time this was surveyed. There's other factors in there, as that's just one headline out of many. Of course, he won't talk about immigration. It ain't in his DNA. And if he wants to stay silent on that, what about prison places? This story is growing by the day as well. We hear today that many of those released early will simply just commit more crimes, and one estimate says 90,000 of those crimes will be committed from those released early. And not only do we have diabolical possibility of killers of PC Harper being let out of jail early doors, we've now been told that 3 terrorists who plotted to blow up planes potentially killing hundreds, could be free within weeks. This is the Al-Qaeda trio that were jailed in 2010, the Liquid Bombers. And what do you do to unwind? Apparently there is a bit of a growing trend for reenactment. You know that thing when people dress up as Roundheads and Cavaliers and then fight a battle in the middle of a field, middle of nowhere? That, bit of jousting, jump on a horse, joust. It's called medieval combat as well. I think that takes it to an even higher level. And it's some people's idea of relaxing at the weekend. You into some of that? Unusual hobbies, pastimes, always worth a chat. 0344 499 1000. That's where you'll find us. Drop us a voice note there as well. Neil says, Ian, why do you say down in London when you yourself are sat right in the middle of London? Just asking. Well, it started, there is a reason for it, actually. It started because a national radio station is not meant to have any sort of geographic central hub because it's central to everywhere. So nothing worse than a person reading the weather going, here in London. Well, it's not much. Here, what do you mean here in London? I'm in flipping Newcastle, mate. I'm in Edinburgh. I'm in Blackpool. Here in London. I don't hear the weather or the travel person going, yeah, well, it might be bad where you are, but down here in London. And it was always designed to offset that, because a radio station could be anywhere, because people listen from everywhere. That's the theory behind it. And it's kind of stuck a little bit, really. But yes, we are in the capital city. Let's speak to Isabel Oakeshott, who's not down in London. Talks International editor on a range of things. Morning to you, Isabel.
Morning. I'm over on the Isle of Wight, and very beautiful it is too.
Over on the Isle of Wight, one of the greatest undiscovered, well, not undiscovered, but relatively speaking. Underrated. I think it's
stunner.
Probably the way to. It's beautiful, and when the weather's good, and you can do all sorts of things, and it's just got so much going on for a very small place. I mean, the ferry is, I think, am I right in saying it's the most expensive passenger ferry in the world per mile?
Yeah, I mean, it's insanely expensive coming over on the ferry.
Yeah.
It only takes about 15 minutes on the passenger ferry, and it's about 25 quid or something like that.
Yeah, it's extraordinary, and if you do it all the time.
Yeah, but it really is worth it. I'm looking out. It's just the most incredible sea and beaches, and yeah, it's just the Solent is so warm. I'm an absolute wimp when it comes to cold water. But yesterday I was out on the paddleboard and it was gorgeous. Yeah. So there you go. People go to Cornwall. They somehow don't realise the Isle of Wight is an awful lot easier to get to, and it's an island.
And it's an island, yes. There really is that sense of something special. It does feel, I think, when you're in the Isle of Wight, you do get a sense that you're in another country.
Yeah, it really does. You can kind of forget all the crap that's happening on the mainland, which I'm sure we're about to run through.
We are indeed. I was going to ask you about those medieval reenactments, as to whether you've ever gone full Maid Marian on the case.
Well, actually, when I grew up in Scotland, and they used to do these, where I grew up in a place on the east coast called Dunbar, there was a very famous Battle of Dunbar, for those who know about their Scottish history. And it took place on the field next to our farmhouse. And there used to be periodically battle reenactments on that field. And it was an incredible thing to see. And I think it's sort of a bit easy to mock this stuff, but isn't it kind of a bit wholesome in a funny sort of way?
Yes, it really is. I think there's two sorts of reenactments, really. There's the stuff we're talking about here, where people who were into this are also genuinely really into their history of this period and this era, and it fascinates them, and it's, you know, it's a bit of robust fun, but I think they genuinely like the whole story of what's being reenacted. But then you get a different thing. When I left school, I worked on a holiday camp as a kind of summer job, and they would have these country and western weekends. And this wasn't just a case of inviting a sort of Tammy Wynette sound-alike to bang out a few tunes on the stage. Everybody that attended these things dressed as cowboys and cowgirls, and they did this, but with all the pecking orders that went with it. So if there was somebody who was the sheriff, you had to defer to this person over the weekend, and people got there were arguments would happen because you were disrespectful to the sheriff when it was actually just a fella from Cleethorpes in a hat.
Yeah, I kind of like this stuff. A friend of mine's on holiday in I guess it's fairly rural Spain, I don't know. She sent me some incredible videos over the weekend about a tradition they have in the village that she's staying in, where men go roaring through the village on horseback, and they have to try to grab ribbons that are hanging from some overhead wires. So as they gallop through that town, they have to kind of grab a ribbon, and the ribbon, believe it or not, represents a lady from the village. And whichever ribbon you manage to grab, you're supposed to spend the night with this woman. I just thought, oh my God, but come on, it's a bit fun, isn't it?
Kind of crude Spanish version of Tinder or something. I mean, it's a strange way to do it. You grab the... Yeah, I like the idea. I mean, it's better than grabbing a person, I suppose. There's a...
I suppose there is that, Ian. There is that. I think the point is these fun traditions are quirky and better than being on Xbox or whatever it is people do. It's just something a bit different, a bit old-fashioned. In our village in the Cotswolds, they have the annual egg throwing competition.
Nice.
And some of this stuff just literally goes back centuries, doesn't it?
Yeah, it really does. You know, cheese rolling and goodness knows what else that goes on. I tend to agree with you. I quite like and enjoy the fact that we keep there. You know, there's no specific reason, just tradition, and tradition in itself, I think, is a great thing, and we should embrace some of those things.
Exactly that. So, are we going to get on to gloomier subjects?
Well, let's get on to
early prisoner release.
Well, let's start with Andy Burnham actually, because he's on this tour, and he's going to convince us all that he's on our side and on everybody's side. And if you're struggling with the cost of living, I was looking at petrol. Actually, petrol's just gone right up again.
It has, yeah.
I filled up the car yesterday in a supermarket petrol station, which are always the cheapest. It was nearly $1.60 a litre, and I thought, hang on a second, we're nearly $1.70 a litre, I think. Yeah, something like that. And I said, what's happened? It was going downwards. It's now going back up again. Is this the Strait of Hormuz again?
So I've got a knackered old diesel car, and diesel here on the islands was $1.80 yesterday.
Yeah, that would make sense.
I mean, thanks Tesco for your 5p off a litre or whatever it is you're offering. I did take your little voucher, and we got about 25p off the eventual bill.
Every little helps, you know.
I mean, it suddenly seems to have shot up, doesn't it? And I didn't actually think this was going to come up in our conversation, Ian. Otherwise, I was sort of on the cusp of Googling just what's happening in the Straits of Hormuz and whether this is the immediate cause of it. It's something I'm normally on top of.
Yeah, well, one would assume it, because I've noticed that there's a direct correlation, obviously. You know, we report on the headlines that, the Strait's closed, and then almost the next 48 hours, you go to the petrol, it's gone up again, and then, the Strait's open, and Donald Trump has said this, great, it's gone right down again, and it was coming down substantially. But the point is, I suppose, forget about the Strait of Hormuz, because Andy Burnham is the man that's going to solve the problem. He's got this thing sorted. He's going to go around the country on a sort of battle bus, one would assume. I don't know what the specific locations are. They don't always release that kind of information for obvious reasons too early, but he's out and about and he's in listening mode.
I mean, I just think it's obviously pure theatrics. No one's going to tell you the truth about things when you're going around with a pack of photographers hanging around you, and it's all very artificial. I mean, he might get a bit of an ear bashing from somebody, I suppose, in the time-honoured way of British politics. Someone will take their moment for their 15 minutes of fame and have a right old go at him. But he shouldn't need to do a listening exercise. That the point of that is you do it before you run for the highest job in the land. You're supposed to be on top of what it is that people need, what it is that people are feeling. And, there are subjects he is very on top of, and I don't think the ones that he isn't so familiar with are really going to be particularly helped by going around the country. I mean, I would have hoped that he was pretty in tune with the problems as they are already.
Well, you would have thought so. And, even if, he comes back with this sort of bullet point list of the major concerns of the average Brit, I can't imagine what he can do about it. I mean, he's already talked about, taking the VAT off energy bills. And, OK, that's better than having it remain there. But it's a very small amount. The £2 bus fare great if it works. Beware of the headlines. It often portrays a different story underneath it. But the point is, on the big stuff, on the real, when it comes to energy bills, it's not the VAT, it's the cost of the entire thing, which isn't helped by the fact we have an entire department called Net Zero, which has a squillion quid thrown into it every single year in the budget. So things like, he's not going to do any of that. So what does he do with the information that he gleans from this whistle-stop tour?
I don't know. I mean, maybe it's so that he can say, well, when I was in Rotherham or when I was down in Taunton, or I don't know. I don't know. It's just, it's performative. I hate that word, but it is performative. I think we're in a very weird sort of lull at the moment. It's August, which is always a funny time with politics. And we've got this new Prime Minister. We've got Parliament not sitting. And I think when the new political season kicks off in September, there's going to be a very rapid countdown to reality for Andy Burnham and his new administration. This budget coming up in the autumn is going to be an absolute shocker for everybody who is the strivers, Alarm Clock Britain. It's going to be an absolute shocker. And I think what he's doing at the moment is all about just sort of playing for time, trying to get some positive publicity ahead of a horrible cold, hard reality that comes after these incredible heat waves end and autumn begins, and we all have to face up to some realities. The migrants keep coming, the welfare bill keeps ballooning. Far too many people who could work are choosing not to. I met somebody the other day who was really good at her job, someone locally on the Isle of Wight, and I said, so what days of the week do you work then? And she said, I just do 2 days a week. And I said, what? She's quite young. And I was like, why? Because you're brilliant at what you do. You seem to enjoy it. Oh, I just don't, I just like to have quite a nice life. I don't want things to be too hard. And it was only later I thought, well, that is probably somebody doing the 16-hour thing. If you work more than 2 shifts, you lose your universal credit. Now, I don't know for sure, but that's my guess. This person didn't strike me as somebody very wealthy. And this is the problem that we're dealing with. We're dealing with people who are choosing not to work very hard as a lifestyle choice. Sure. And the Tories enabled that for 14 years. They enabled it. So I'm not really in listening mode myself, unlike Andy Burnham, when it comes to what the Tories are saying about solutions. But he's got such mega problems to deal with.
He has.
They need drastic solutions.
I just hope he doesn't do that thing that when he goes back to Parliament, he starts name-checking. That horrible thing that politicians do.
Oh, my God. Corbyn did this all time when I spoke to Eileen.
Yes, I was talking to Jean in Shropshire. It's like, stop it.
God,
I'm glad I'm not alone in that rather random act of annoyance.
Cringe.
It really is cringe, but you can see it coming. Let's talk about immigration, because we can talk about it. And when I saw this story about Andy Burnham on his tour, I was so pleased that you were on this morning, Isabel, because I know I can always have a great chat with you about this stuff. I feel more passionately about this than I think anything I've ever felt about in my entire life. And I will argue till I go to my grave that it's not a left-wing, right-wing issue. It should never be. This is a problem for our country in all sorts of ways. It's not just the crossing the channel thing, that's the visuals. There's all the other forms of immigration, overstayers, legal immigration that should not be legal immigration. It's a whole mixed picture. Now, Andy Burnham, we were talking a little earlier, I'm going to repeat myself for about the 4th time, I don't know if you heard this, Isabel, about Gordon Brown's moment with Gillian Duffy when he had the microphone left on and he called her a bigoted woman. And there was one journalist who was saying, look, every time I spoke to any of his kind of team off the record, they would say, we keep telling him, you've got to talk about this, Gordon, because it's the numbers. Forget, it's not about being a xenophobe or a racist. Just the numbers are so big. Local authorities where 2,000, 3,000, 4,000 people come into a town, it substantially alters the entire financial equation of the local budget, housing, doctors, you name it. You have to talk about it. He couldn't go there. He just couldn't go there. He didn't know how to do it. He didn't feel it. It wasn't on his radar. I sense Andy Burnham is exactly that person.
Yeah, I mean, he's hardly talked about it, has he? And in peak migrant crossing season, no less. You know, to be so quiet on it speaks of a real political shortcoming. And there's been a lot in recent days of gleeful comment from the left about, you know, oh, reformers blown up, reforms had its day, you know, reforms. I think there was some slightly interestingly calculated seat projections yesterday over the weekend, putting reform in third place at the next general election. A lot of sort of excitement from the left about that. But make no mistake, if Andy Burnham does not tackle this crisis head on, all those gleeful predictions will come to nothing. Because, as you say, it is, for me anyway, it's the number one issue facing our country, not just because of, it's not just about numbers and nationalities, it's because of the impact it has on everything else we're talking about.
Yeah.
You know, you can't talk about any other aspect, pretty much, of challenges facing Britain right now, including Andy Burnham's beloved care for the elderly mission that he's set himself, which is a really good mission, by the way. But all these things link back to mass uncontrolled immigration. And as you say, the small boats are the most symbolic aspect of it. And, you know, I'm never, ever going to get tired of talking about that. I'm never, ever going to stop trying to remind people of the type of people in those boats. Mostly probably decent people, but they've got nothing to offer our country, bluntly nothing. Do you know how bad this is? When they get to the first processing point in the UK, some of them are not even capable of saying in English the name of the country that they come from. They have to be shown lists of flags to identify where they're from. You know, what are we doing importing all these people, each of whom is going to be a net burden on the state for years, quite possibly forever.
And that's
insanity.
One of the reasons it is relevant is because here's Andy Burnham talking about the cost of living crisis. You know, I mentioned net zero. I mean, that's right up there. And of course, so is this, because, you know, we know £6, £7, £8 million a day on hotel and HMO accommodation, but that's just the start of it, because then there's the fact that you might be here for some years. You've got the issue around health services. I mean, address the cost of living crisis, two fundamentals between the two of us we've just given the Prime Minister, neither of which will be raised at all this week.
It's completely bonkers politically. And, I mean, Shabana Mahmood, you'd like to think does care about this stuff, but she's been pretty quiet, hasn't she?
Yep.
And I just don't have any optimism that Andy Burnham is going to tackle this head on. I initially thought, could he do something incredible in his first weeks in office? Could he actually do something real on these issues? And instead he went down to Dover and stood by an empty inflatable boat. I mean, it's comic.
It's a lovely boat. It was a beautiful boat, I have to say, Isabel, and and he clearly admired it from afar. Listen, Isabel, we're out of time, but thank you as ever. Enjoy the rest of the day over there on the Isle of Wight. Isabel Oakeshott, Talks International editor. Thank you to her. We will get a Labour voice on this as well in a moment. Paul Richards will join us to give us his take on Andy Burnham's big whistle-stop tour of the UK. He's in listening mode. Are you feeling it? Are you sensing it? Let's get a word on Burnham. A voice note from Lillian. Morning, Lillian.
Morning, Ian. That Andy Burnham is going to do absolutely sod all for the working, tax-paying people of this country. He's got no intention of stopping the boats. We all know that. And while they're flooding him by the day, we, the taxpayers, are going to end up paying for it. And then he's saying the jails are full. Well, instead of letting violent criminals out, why don't you let them hundreds or thousands of people that have been put in there for tweets out first? The man is an absolute imbecile. He's just going to run our country even further into the ground. I am sick of it. And if I could afford to get out of this country, which I've called home for 71 years, I would go tomorrow. Sick of the lot of it.
My father was born here, my mother was born here, I was born here, I consider myself British. People with exactly the same credentials, but maybe their family came from the Caribbean or came from India, but they have lived here 2 or 3 generations. They shared language, values, beliefs, integrated, assimilated generations ago. Why is they having babies? Why is that a threat to this country?
So, Julia, you are here acting as a mouthpiece for the regime that currently governs this country.
Shut up, Charlie. You're embarrassing yourself.
What you're saying is exactly the same thing I've been hearing from my...
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
And good morning. Welcome back. It is Talk Breakfast. It's Ian Collins in for Jeremy Carlton. John in Bristol says, my last 3 holidays have been on the beautiful Isle of Wight. It's like going back to a Britain that we've now lost. Great beaches, lovely clean countryside, fab pubs, etc. I'd live there tomorrow if I could move. I constantly hear this about the Isle. I think the Isle of Wight's going to pay dividends for, well, the Isle of Wight's always done quite well. As I remember as a kid, like if somebody in your class went to the Isle of Wight, they always came back with a bottle full of sand, because there's, you know, the different types of sand in a bottle. I was fascinated by that. But it took ages before I ever went there. This one comes in from Martin in Newark-on-Trent. It says, morning, Ian. Enjoying the show. Immigration will be the downfall of this government, and if not stopped, the country as well. Well, a lot of people feel like that. I don't think Andy Burnham feels like that. And it's interesting. Let's get a word from Paul Richards, former Labour Special Advisor. It's always good to gauge your take on these things, Paul. Morning to you, by the way. Morning. Before we get on to the whistle-stop tour, do you think Andy Burnham and this government have just done a basic calculation? They're not going to try and out-reform. Keir Starmer had a dalliance with that idea for about 30 seconds and then rode back on it. So let's play to our own gallery and some of those fence-sitters, the Greens, the Corbynites, because that's where our votes are. Reform voters are never going to turn to us anyway. So we'll play to that gallery. So when he doesn't talk about immigration, which he nipped down to Dover for 20 minutes and did a piece to camera in front of the good old White Cliffs, a bit of a Vera Lynn moment, all fabulous stuff. But it's not in his political DNA, and it's not really in his political, to his political advantage either. Is that the tact? Is that a deliberate manoeuvre, do you sense, by Labour?
Well, he was criticised for being on holiday, and now he's been criticised for not being on holiday and talking to folks. And then he was criticised for not talking about migration. And he mentioned it in his victory speech in Makerfield, and then again in the visit on the 2nd of August that you just mentioned, Ian. So the poor guy can't get it right either way. Now, to your question, is it about just the politics, the optics, and the vote? I don't think it is. I think he wants to fix it because it's a public policy problem that is a disgrace, obviously, that is causing all kinds of problems with up the system in terms of hotels having to be closed and then army camps having to be opened and rioting and people biting police officers and the rest of it. And he just wants, as Prime Minister, to make it all go away. So that's why he spent some of his very early hours as Prime Minister trying to sort this out and make sure that it just isn't this issue that people are thinking about day after day.
But
after
he's got to go big on this, hasn't he? He's got to sort of that thing that Trump does. Now, even if you hate Trump, I'm not a massive Trump fan, by the way. I think he gets so many things wrong, gets a free pass on quite a lot of it as well. But that thing that the Americans generally do this quite well. You know, they do shoot from the hip a little bit. They sound incredulous. They sound equally as angry as we do about stuff. And they're very good at that. And we're not going to hear Andy Burnham say, I've looked at this Channel story. It is absolutely unacceptable. It is criminal what is going on the Channel. I'm going to stop it. You never hear that. And in fairness, you rarely hear it from Conservatives either. But it's very sort of, yep, I've looked at the picture. I'm going to do my best to try and address the problem.
Well, I think that the criminality of it is absolutely front of his mind. I mean, he kept Shabana Mahmood in post, who's tough on this. He's also put Anna Turley in as the Home Office Minister, and she's pretty across this. These are not bleeding heart liberals, I can assure you, nor are they chasing Green votes. We see the Greens as our enemy as much as anybody else. So it's not about that. I mean, on to the Trump point, you know, if there was a single simple thing any government could do of any stripe to stop this evil trade, then they would do it. You know, for Reform to say, "I'll just stick the Navy in the Channel." First of all, the Navy is already in the Channel. And second of all, the Navy will tell you that's not what the Navy is for. It's not built to prevent small boat crossings by, dedicated people smugglers. That's a stupid idea. It sounds simple, but if it would have worked, we would have done it, which is why you have to get the approach right of all the different things, reducing pull factors, but also tackling the gangs, also stopping the boats getting anywhere near the French coast before they hit the water, getting more of these specialist French forces in post who can, slash the boats with Stanley knives and take on the dangerous gangs of criminals who are putting people on the boats in the first place, disrupting their phone signals, stopping them using TikTok to advertise. Each time something like that comes up, people say, "Oh, well, how ridiculous, how little, how puny." But it's the aggregation it's all of these things all at once that will stop this trade. And we didn't used to have it, and there will be a day when we don't have it again. It's not inevitable, but Andy Burnham knows that. And I think to say that he doesn't care or doesn't get it, I think is absolutely wrong. He's one of the most political, attuned prime ministers we've had forever. You were talking about Gordon Brown earlier, and I think that was probably a fair critique of his view of it. But Andy Burnham is not in the same boat as that at all.
Okay.
If somebody came up to him, and if Mrs. Duffy came up to Andy Burnham and said, "What about all these migrants?" he would address the issue on, not call her a bigot. So I think it's a different kettle of fish. I really do.
Do you think then this tour he's doing is in listening mode, and that I don't want to be too critical of Andy Burnham, but I mean that should be your default position anyway as a prime minister. But fine, that's sort of a slight sort of slogan that's been attached to August from Downing Street. The Prime Minister is in listening mode, so he's going around different parts of the country. We haven't quite got a list of where he's going. There's obvious reasons why they might not release all of that info ahead of time. I understand that too. But what comes of this? Because people will naturally say, if he says, "What's your cost of living crisis?" to Gillian Duffy, she might say, well, I mean, the rent, the cost of filling up my car, food, taxes. She'll give the whole list, and the next person will give a similar list. So he's got a nice database of what people think, and he probably knows all of this anyway. What does he gain from that? Because he can't do much with it, can he? He's got no money.
Well, if he spent August either on holiday or bunkered down in Downing Street, people would be rightly saying, well, why doesn't he get out and about and talk to people and find out what the issues are? So that's what he's doing. He's out and about talking to people, finding out what the issues are, and then he's getting criticised for that. But I'd rather he was out talking to folks and actually hearing what people are saying than reading reports about it in his library in Downing Street. And of course, we can be cynical. There's a little bit of, PR around this. He is good at PR. So yes, there will be the TikTok videos, and there will be the amusing clips about debating the best pub snack and all of that. And there's nothing wrong with that, because we do need empaths as prime ministers. And, he gets criticised for being blokish. I imagine we'll see him in pubs and talking about football and pork scratchings. But so what? I'd rather have that than some weirdo.
No, I do kind of get that, but it can also become a bit cringe, can't it? Because we look at politicians, and I think when politicians are asked, I never ask politicians those questions about, what's your favourite football team, and do you know the offside rule, and what's your favourite album, or what's the cost of a loaf of bread, all this kind of stuff. They're all sort of bear trappy, gotcha moments, and they're a bit tired. But so to see a Prime Minister sort of cosplaying a normal bloke is equally up there. And I would say that if it was Kemi Badenoch.
Yeah, I agree. If it's inauthentic and they're just sort of doing it because an advisor has told them to, and pretend football fan or whatever, absolutely. But with Burnham, I've known Burnham for 30 years. I'm sure you've known him a long time too. It's genuine. He can bore on about Everton till the pub shut.
That's true.
He does know the offside rule.
Yeah.
And he can tell you who played left back in 1978. In the final or whatever. He can do all of that because it's real, and therefore I think politicians playing to their strengths and who they really are. He really was in the hacienda in the 80s listening to the Stone Roses. This is not something that come out of a focus group.
No, I get that, but then, of course Keir Starmer also knew quite a lot about football, but he was perpetually offside for 2 years, wasn't he? So
well, yes, he could bore on about Arsenal till the pub shut as well, but I mean I think Burnham is a different category of politician. Of course, he'll get criticised for being blokish and for wearing T-shirts and all of that, but I don't want to see him trying to pretend to be something that he's not, because that's the thing that the public hate the most, is the sort of artificial, concocted politicians who are the product of a focus group, not of who their heart and soul is. And I think that's better for Burnham to be true to himself than try to be something that he isn't.
So you're enjoying the TikTok videos, are you, Paul?
Well, my kids tell me about them. I have to say, I'm not on TikTok myself, but he is a people. My kids have seen him on TikTok. He's reaching an audience. Yeah, so that's good for our politics.
Paul, great to have you on as ever. Thank you. Paul Richards is a former Labour special advisor on the obviously just slightly more pro Andy Burnham. I don't mind. Half of us want our. I went through a phase of thinking I don't want my politicians to be normal people. In fact, by definition, I want somebody who's completely not conventional and like me. I don't want someone like me running the country, frankly. We'd probably be skint in a fortnight for different reasons, because I know where I'd put all the money. I know where I'd save all the money. You take the point I'm making. I want somebody who's a little more extraordinary and very different and marked out. 0344 499 1000. This is Talk.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk. Oh.
It is indeed Talk. 0344 499 1000 is where you will find us. Dorney says, you're so right. Following his by-election campaign, he said illegal immigration didn't come up on the doorstep. And the number one issue raised was the cost of living issues, most of which would be assisted by not paying 6 million quid a day on illegals. I mean, that would help, right? I mean, I'm no economist, but I've got a funny feeling if you're sitting there with somebody who's got a spreadsheet and someone who is, savvy on the numbers, then where can we save some money? Where can we say, well, we've got £6 million a day. Sorry, say that again. £6 million. Yes, £6 million a day. We're spending on that, and that, of course, is the kind of accommodation bit. Then we've got the in perpetuity people who stay here, and the cost of that, and that would be housing, that would be health, and in the case of those with kids, it would be education as well. 0344 499 1000. What is going on in terms of immigration, however, between Spain and Italy? A right royal row has broken out. Meloni over there in Italy suffered a bit of a setback back in March, of course, with a referendum to stop immigration. And, of course, there's been issues ever since. And then after what happened with Morocco at the weekend, there was then a ban from Spain on the Italians coming in. It's not straightforward stuff. Let's get a word from Ambassador and former NATO senior civilian representative for Afghanistan, Stefano Pontecorvo. Ambassador, good morning to you.
Good morning to you. How are you?
I'm very good, sir. Geopolitical scene at the moment is a complicated one. Who would have thought it? Here we are in the 21st century. By now, when I was at school, I was taught, by the time we get to 2026, nobody will be at war. There'll be no battles. Life will be easy. It'll be just as the Victorians predicted. We'll have learnt all the lessons of the past and life will be fantastic. And here we are now in a very different situation, whether it's about wars or whether it's about, in this case, immigration. It's never been so complex.
That is absolutely correct. And I'm afraid that it's going to continue to be complicated until people realize that this is not an emergency, but it is structural. So if you want to take emergency measures to tackle a structural issue, you have a problem, and we do have a problem.
When you say structural, can you shine a little bit more light onto what you mean by that, sir?
I mean that the population in Africa is growing hugely. By 2030, there will be 300 million young Africans on the labor market. The African labor market can take over in the best scenario, can take in about 100 million in the best case scenario. Where do you think the others are going to go?
Yeah. So this is, and it's an interesting assessment and one I wouldn't dispute for 1 second. This immigration problem then that Europe has experienced is, do I take from what you've just said, is likely to get worse?
It certainly is. Look, there is an issue of numbers and an issue of perception. The perception is a lot worse than the numbers. I'll take my own country. Now, the perception, people say that, analysts say that immigration is the foremost concern of Italian. It isn't. It's second. The worst is healthcare. But still, the perception is there. It's pretty bad. It's pretty bad, especially for a right-wing government that was voted in to tackle immigration issues, and it is perceived as having done nothing. It has done very little, in fact. I myself am a Meloni supporter, but rethinking my positions. I was also a Meloni supporter, but that said, the perception comes from the fact that you were mentioning this. The treatment that is given to Italians versus the treatment that's given to immigrants is perceived as unfair, and it is. And it is. A guy who has been a shopkeeper or has worked for 40 years can get a 600 euro pension. I'm talking about my own grandfather. And an illegal immigrant gets 1,200 euros, exactly double. And that is it. Second, the figures for crime are ghastly. The illegal immigrants in general, illegal immigrants are about 5% of the population. Crime is about 60%, and it's visible crime. It's harassing ladies, it's rape, it's what we call in Italian crime against property, which is, thefts and all that, things that touch you personally. You know, if you read that the bank has been robbed, that's terrible.
Yeah.
If you come back home or your neighbor has been robbed, that touches you personally.
Correct.
So there has been an issue, there is an issue of an incapacity of dealing with the public perception. And then there is an underlying reality which needs to be tackled sooner or later, because things are only going to become worse. That said, Italy needs immigration, as all countries needs legal immigration, because there are a number of jobs Italians are simply not willing to do, so, and Brits and so on. So I lived 200 years in London. My plumber was a Kosovar, so we know these things. So let's go on to them.
In terms of, you said at the beginning you were a Meloni supporter. Many people have applauded her for trying to address this issue in not letting many of these illegal migrants enter Italy. You use that in a kind of past tense. Are you no longer a Meloni supporter? From what you've been saying, it sounds as if she would be speaking your language.
No, she should be speaking our language. She is speaking my language. But, you know, I'm a 70-year-old. You know, Italians are cynical. We've seen from barbarians to everybody else. Now we're no longer the times in which you can say things and then not follow through. Especially, you know, the bottom line, without being, you know, too sophisticated an analyst, is if you vote for a right-wing party, which doesn't mean a fascist party. Meloni is simply not a fascist. I know her well, she isn't. But a right-wing party, which is concerned with security and immigration, has to deliver. This government has not delivered.
Where have they not delivered, Ambassador?
They have not delivered in the fact that, you know, you look in the road, baby gangs, Moroccan, Algerian, Tunisian, and so, and they hurt. You see there are entire towns, pieces of countryside in which the police goes in. There are no areas in Italy in which the police does not go in, but they go in combat gear nearly. You know, you will remember, you were kindly reminding viewers of my past. I mean, I see some Italian police which go into certain areas, and I am reminded of my times in Afghanistan. That is no longer acceptable for the Italian public opinion.
Yeah, and that is, you're not seeing any significant change under Meloni. Is that the point?
The point is, you know, the illegal immigrants which have landed on our shores have gone down from 160 to 60,000. 160,000 to 60,000. So the numbers are there. But still, first, the sea route is not the only route.
Yep.
And second, the ones that are in and are illegal have simply two, how can I say, I'm using the wrong word, but you'll find a better one, a posh treatment, and do not pay for the consequences of what they're doing to society.
Right. So it's all very well stopping people coming in, but you're still left, as the same in this country, you're still left with tens of thousands, possibly more, who are already there. And it's that area that's not really being addressed.
That is correct. And you know, as someone who has lived in the public eye for 40 years, I was a diplomat and so on. I am, I mean, what surprises me is that the government has not managed to turn around the perception. There are things that cannot be turned around. Baby gangs, which are a lot worse than, you know, they're not folklore. They're really, there are, you know, people, entire towns that close up at 9 o'clock because on Fridays and so on, and because there are areas you can't go to.
Wow.
Criminality on trains, on plane, on in the road is it's not, you know, it's not far west, but still it's a lot worse than it used to be.
Yeah.
And you know, and we have had for 4 years a right-wing government which was supposed to take care of this.
Final point, when we talk about Spain versus Italy, we're normally talking about football. What we're talking about here now is a battle between Sanchez and Meloni on who's allowed to go where and when and how. What do you make of that latest situation? This, of course, comes out of what happened in Morocco.
Look, you know, first of all, unfortunately, Spain versus Italy, I hope it does not finish on the football field. I don't like losing 6-0. Italian football is...
Fair point.
Yeah, Italian football is at that point now. Maybe we may, you know, Anyway, coming back to less serious issues, because football is a very serious issue. And by the way, well done to UK.
Yeah, well, we nearly got there, so it's just...
Nearly got there. Well, but you're smarter because you invest on your own youngsters.
That's fair.
Whereas, we buy from outside, and anyway. What I make of this? You were before mentioning the referendum. Since the referendum, the government got edgy, and it was because it was his first big defeat. Plus, we have on the right of Mrs. Meloni, we have this general Vannacci, which started off from 2% and is now at around estimated at 12%. He's a really far right guy. I know him well. He was his former military. He's a very smart guy. Keep in mind that psychology matters, and Mrs. Meloni herself started from 1.9 and ended up at 32%.
Sure.
She's been there and she's seen it. Now, I think that, as Talleyrand used to say, I think it's worse than a crime, it's a mistake. This is a mistake. What the government did, closing the frontiers, is technically it was a mistake. The Spaniards, they have not closed the frontier to Italy. They do random checks on Italian. They harass a bit, Italian planes are coming in. It's not a block on Italians going in. But it is a mistake. Sooner or later, Mrs. Meloni is very, very smart. She still remains the smartest cookie in the jar. She will realize that it is, she'll then, how can I say, force herself on her allies, which are part of her problem, and get rid of this situation.
On that point, Ambassador, great to have you on, sir. Let's speak again. Really interesting stuff. Ambassador, former NATO senior civilian representative for Afghanistan as well, Stefano Pontecorvo, with us on the programme. Did I get the accent right there as well? Probably not. Stay with us. More to come from you. This is Talk.
What's this about you approving of Andy Burnham going on a holiday?
Yes, I do. I've written an article for the iNewspaper. I think you're wrong. I think Carl Turner's wrong.
Why?
Why? Because people need holidays and we want politicians
15 days? 15 days. What nonsense are you writing in the iPaper?
Do you want to take it?
What is he, an oil rig worker? 2 weeks on, 2 weeks off? You don't think he'll come to regret this holiday? Let me tell you, he will.
I'd rather take it now than in October, and I want our politicians to be like normal people taking a holiday in the summer, but we'll get into all of that.
That's absolute rubbish.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
It is 5 to 9. This one in from Chris in Newbury says, the man of the people, our new Prime Minister, isn't travelling the country meeting the people. He's going to visit lots of Labour-supporting activists who will tell him exactly what he wants to hear is wrong. It'll be more rent controls, workers' rights, more taxes on the rich and the middle classes. He won't meet a single member of the public. We'll see how that pans out. A lot of people making that point. Chris, thank you very much indeed for that. You're listening to Talk Breakfast as Ian Collins in for Jeremy Kyle for the rest of this week. Let's get some sports news.
90 minutes in 90 seconds. From The Sun.
Let's get a word from Josh Hall, Arsenal reporter over there at the Sun. Morning to you, Josh. And Marcus Rashford is back in the Mancunian fold. What's going on?
Morning. That's the news and on the back page today of the Sun. Obviously, Marcus Rashford looked like he was going to be on his way out of Manchester United.
Yeah.
He hasn't played for them since December 2024. Loans at Aston Villa and Barcelona. It looked like Barcelona might trigger the £26 million clause they had in his contract. They decided not to and opted to sign Anthony Gordon. But now they're reintegrating him into the fold. He's part of Michael Carrick's pre-season plans. He's got a new number 14 he's going to wear by the looks of things. And there's hope in Manchester that he might be able to play a part again this season.
It's interesting, isn't it? Just remind us what happened there, because this wasn't a straight case of you're on a free transfer or whatever. You know, there was something more to this story, wasn't there?
Yeah, look, there was concerns from certain managers about Marcus's attitude and about his behaviour after a 3-0 defeat to Manchester City. Yeah. He went out to a birthday party just a matter of hours later. At the time, it was Ruben Amorim who was in charge, and Amorim didn't take lightly to that decision. So there's been question marks over those sorts of things, over that sort of behaviour. And now Michael Carrick's sort of giving the olive branch out, saying have a second chance, because, you know, Rashford, we can't forget, was the wonder kid at Manchester United. He was the face of Manchester United.
Yeah, and you kind of, I mean, such a big signing at United back then, and then, of course, almost within the blink of an eye, suddenly, where's he gone? Where's Rashford gone? I mean, a lot of, even, you know, football supporters were looking at the thing, where's Rashford? He's not on the team. He's playing over there. He's playing at Villa. What happened? So, could be back, everything made up and nicely done. Over at Arsenal, an area you know better than most, Josh, big signings coming to boost a bit of midfield.
Yeah, Bruno Guimaraes made his signing last week. He was paraded out on the pitch yesterday and shown to the Arsenal fans. And Mikel Arteta has had big words to say about him, saying that he's going to take them to the next level, which we're intrigued to see what that might be, having seen Arsenal win the league last season.
Yeah, all right.
The next level must be something really, really quite impressive. So I think Mikel Arteta is very happy with this new signing, and hopefully someone that can make a difference. Yeah,
it'll be great for the domestic game, for the international game, of course. We always look to our teams and think, wow, they got the back four, the midfield, the defence, whatever. But of course, we need homegrown talent as well. Did Arsenal still get that memo, do you think?
Oh, absolutely. I think Arsenal are one of the best clubs in the country when it comes to homegrown talent. I mean, Bukayo Saka's obviously playing on that right-hand side. Yep. So many young players coming through: Marcelo Skelly, Ethan Nwaneri, Max Dowman. Obviously, Declan Rice plays in the middle of the park. So Berrieza, Noni Madueke. There's loads of them at Arsenal.
It's funny, we were just talking to a former ambassador in Italy about politics, but we drifted momentarily into football. He was talking about the Italian football team. I thought any moment now he's going to be filling in for Alan Brazil at this rate. He was saying, we just can't get it right in Italy. And it was almost like, you have the same conversation that we do as well. It doesn't change, does it? Wherever you go in the world. He says, we're not looking correctly. We're picking too many older players. Our transfer situation is all wrong. So we all have a moan about it, but we still love it, Josh.
Absolutely. You can't not have a moan about football. It's part of the fun.
Yeah. And to have an Italian say to me, congratulations to England as well, because you did rather well, was really quite something. Listen, Josh, great to have you with us. Josh Hall, Arsenal reporter over there at The Sun. Thank you to him. More comment from you on the way as well. There's an awful lot to get through in the next section. Stand by for that. We are going to be speaking with Brendan O'Neill right after the news at 9 o'clock. Our lines are open, 0344 499 1000. This is Talk.
The entire city is being overwhelmed, and there are people who bear direct responsibility. Those responsible are the national government, led by Pedro Sanchez and his ministers, as well as Mr. Marlaska, and of course, the European institutions, which have completely failed in what's supposed to be the European Union's external border.
Which country in Europe wipes everybody else's backside but its own people? Here.
Well, Morocco, of course, is hosting the next World Cup. I mean, are we suggesting that...
Oh, don't start me on the World Cup. We'll get
the country that's hosting the next World Cup is too unsafe. It's so unsafe.
Oh, great point.
People have to cross continents to come to Europe. And of course, I have seen personally examples of this. People come from Morocco into Spain, across to the mainland, up France, through the south of France, up to the north of France, where they reach Calais and then eventually come to the UK.
It is a cause for concern.
Invading the country, and what that is weak law, bad management, but very liberal law. They passed a couple of laws, and people read. You know, people are smart. They read from other countries, and they swam that 3-mile sweat law. However, they get people into our country.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Coming up on 3 minutes after 9 o'clock, welcome, the home of common sense. There's a load of stuff going on here, loads of voice notes on the way as well. We're talking about Andy Burnham. He begins his tour of the UK. I don't know what constitutes an Andy Burnham tour. I don't think there's a battle bus as such, but he's on the mooch around the UK, listening, bit of a sounding board for our Prime Minister, because he is a normal bloke, of course, and he's going to find out about the cost of living crisis. He's going to ask real people, because he's a real bloke, what the issues are and what needs to be done. So we can't wait. We're asking the question, if Andy shows up at your front door, what are you going to tell the Prime Minister? I think there's a lot more than just the cost of living crisis. He says he's going to be... Downing Street have said August is listening mode for our Prime Minister. Does that mean that come September he stops listening? Is it just literally for the next 3 weeks only that he's listening to us? Details on that. One area he doesn't talk about a lot. We had a previous Labour advisor, Paul Richards, with us in the last hour that said, no, he's listening on immigration. I don't think he is listening on immigration. I don't think he cares about immigration. It's not in his DNA. He doesn't believe it's politically expedient for him to go there. It's not a narrative he needs to even dip his toe into. He's concentrating on the left, the Greens and those wavering Labour voters, sort of Corbynites. He's not even bothering with the bigger issues like immigration. Prison places. He did put a pause on early release, but we're still seeing the same headlines. And of course, we know that as it stands, the killers of PC Harper are still on the list for early release. Will he step in and do something about that? I refuse to believe that he can't. And coupled with that, this isn't about early release in the conventional sense, but front page of The Sun. Jet bomb plotters free in weeks. These are the Al-Qaeda trio that plan to blow up planes using liquids as their weapon of choice. It would have resulted... This was their 2006 plot. It was foiled by cops and MI5. It would have resulted in multiple loss of life, of course, and did, bizarrely... of all the things that it changed and many rules and safety regulations about flight, it was as a result that the 100 millilitre rule came in about liquids on planes, which is why that expensive perfume is still sitting on the wardrobe shelf of a member of Border Force somewhere. Our lines are open, 0344 499 1000. Can we get a voice note? I think we can, on Andy Burnham. The big tour is happening. This is from Matty. Morning, Matty.
Morning, Ian. Matty from Doncaster. Can we start calling him by his real name, please? Andy the Usurper. Because the only way he was ever going to get to the throne was to usurp someone else's crown. He was never going to get there by himself. Also, when he was doing Makerfield by-election, he was turning around saying on the doorstep he'd heard this, this and this, nothing about immigration and whatnot. You're telling me all them doors he knocked on, not one person mentioned immigration. At least tell us a little bit of a white lie and say a couple said about it, but nothing thing. To say that nobody brought this up to him, complete and utter toss, mate. Man's in cuckoo land. Good vibes, though. That's all that matters, eh? Have a great day, boss. Thank you. Bye.
Thank you, Matty. But he does like white bread and pork scratching, so he's a normal man, as Russ Kane keeps telling us about in his videos. He's a normal man. And that's the main thing. Brendan O'Neill is with us. He's a normal bloke as well, chief political writer at Spiked. Brendan, morning to you. This is Andy Burnham's big kind of post-holiday initiation into public life. You know, he did a few things in those first couple of weeks, went off to Skegness or wherever it was for a bit of a break with his family, and now he's back on the road and he's off to meet real people with real concerns, Brendan.
Yeah, I'll believe it when I see it. I mean, you know, it's good that there's a politician going around the country and listening to people, but I hope he really listens. You know, we all know what happened with Gordon Brown when Gillian Duffy dared to raise the issue of immigration with him all those years ago. He called her a bigoted woman. I hope Andy Burnham doesn't do anything like that. I'm sure he's sussed enough not to do anything like that. But is he really going to listen? Is he going to listen to people's main concerns? We know that very frequently immigration tops the polls of people's main concerns in this issue because they're worried about our porous borders. They're worried about what it says about the state that rules over us, that it can't even protect the borders. They're worried about the kind of men who are coming to this country, the possibility that they are taking advantage of us. All of these entirely legitimate concerns are on people's minds. And I very rarely hear Andy Burnham say anything about them whatsoever. So, you know, he might do a listening stunt, but whether he really listens to what people are saying, that's another question.
Yeah, it's kind of interesting. And if, you know, giving him the benefit of the doubt, there's nothing, you know, it's great that a Prime Minister is going to go and meet people and listen. I love the notionally. There's nothing bad about that. It's a positive. But, of course, he's going to come away, one would assume, with a bit of a list, maybe a sort of database, and he's got it all bullet point listed in front of him. These are the things that are concerning people: filling up your car, buying food for your family, the cost of rent, and, you know, the list will go on in that kind of mode. So what then? Because, you know, we know there's not a lot of money around. He's already made a couple of promises on VAT on energy and bus fares, and even those things are being questioned about how they're going to be paid for. If he's going to expand his list, then what does he do with it?
Well, that's the question, isn't it? And we haven't heard much about what he's actually going to do. You know, I agree with you. It's good that a PM is going around the country and talking to normal people. You know, we've had too many members of the political class just living in their SW1 bubble or staying within their own community, their own sect, their own political tribe, and rarely rubbing shoulders with ordinary people who they tend to look down upon as gammon, you know, a bit stupid, you know, Brexit voters. The kind of the political class sneers at normal people. And if Andy Burnham doesn't do that, then that's a plus in itself. But you're right. You know, he will hear lots about the cost of living because people are very worried about that as well as the other stuff. But then what will he do? You know, when people say to him, look, I can't make ends meet, or I'm struggling with the bills, or my energy bill is too high, what's he going to do? Is he going to initiate a whole new program to make Britain energy independent? Is he going to build nuclear stations, dig for more oil, frack for more gas? Probably not. You know, those really radical things, radical in the positive sense, that could make us a richer, wealthier, more independent country, that's not on the agenda at all. So it seems that what he'll offer people is a few little savings here and there, a couple of bob off your bus fare, you know, maybe a few quid trimmed off your annual energy costs. It won't be the huge developments that people are crying out for.
Indeed, and lots of people mentioning things like net zero, and as Cliff in Berkshire says, I agree with, we spoke to Ben Habib earlier, he says, I agree with Ben and others that we should ditch net zero. However, am I correct in thinking it is written into law thanks to Theresa May? I accept Parliament can change a law, but does anyone believe a Labour majority would put such a law through? That's absolutely true, isn't it, Brendan, what Cliff has just said? It's an act of Parliament, so it would mean getting rid of that. I have wondered about this, as to whether Andy Burnham could sort of have a moratorium almost on this and say, right, we're not going to ditch it, so we're not breaching the act of Parliament, we don't need to have another vote, but what we're going to do is suspend it for, I don't know, 4 years while we get the cost of living sorted out. I don't know if that option is open to him, but it would be an area where he would save billions.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, the fundamental point is that in order to really improve people's lives in a meaningful way, we need growth. We need huge amounts of economic growth. And the problem with the modern day left is that they are expressly anti-growth. They see growth as a problem. They see growth as the thing that is killing the planet. You know, they openly say we've had too much growth, we need to do something else. And that way of thinking infects the Labour Party itself. I don't know how much it goes to the very top of the Labour Party, but there are certainly backbenchers who would agree with that kind of bourgeois prejudice that economic growth is a bad thing, because they live quite nice, comfortable lives. They don't have have to care about creating new jobs for working class communities or new factories or new forms of nuclear energy or whatever else it might be. So the anti-growth mentality will be a huge thing for Burnham to tackle. You know, we've just been throwing deck chairs of the Titanic for years when it comes to the economy. We've just been tweaking it here, tweaking it there, saving a bit here, spending it over there. It's not working. We need real huge change, but that will involve a change in mindset amongst the people who rule us, and there's no evidence at all that that's coming.
Absolutely right. We mentioned, and you referenced it as well, the Gordon Brown moment, which was very pivotal, of course, in 2010 when he met Gillian Duffy, who was a lifelong Labour voter. That's what kind of marked this out as being even more interesting than it perhaps would have been, you know, had it been a Conservative voter. And of course, he met her and she proclaimed her concerns to him while he was on the hustings on a visit during the election campaign. And she said, there's a problem with immigration. There's too many people coming to the country. This is 16 years ago. And then, of course, Gordon Brown and his advisor got into the back of the prime ministerial car, but didn't realise their microphones had been left on. Let's have a reminder of what happened.
Yeah, they're all...
No, we've been trying to get people back quickly, but are they going to go to university? That's the plan?
I hope so. They're only 12 and 10.
Oh, they're only 12 and 10, but they're doing well at school.
Yeah, very good.
A good family.
Yeah,
good to see you.
And the education system in Rochdale, I will congratulate it.
Good. And it's very nice to see you. Take care.
Thanks, Gordon.
That was a disaster. Well, just... Okay. Should never have put me with that woman. Whose idea was that?
No, I didn't see.
It's Sue, I think. They're just ridiculous.
I'm not sure they'll go with that one.
They will go with it.
What did she say?
Everything. She's just a sort of bigoted woman that said she used to be Labour. I mean, it's just ridiculous. I don't know why Sue pushed her up to work.
And then they lost the signal. I think it was a Sky microphone, as I remember rightly, Brendan. If I was the Sky person, I'd have ridden on a bike with the rest of the power pack so I could have picked up the rest of the conversation. I mean, the only thing, every time I hear that, I think, I know that Gordon Brown could be quite salty in his vocabulary. I always think that could have been so much worse. As bad as it was, it could have been even worse had he really let loose on the language. But he called her a bigoted woman, and the reason he did, and I was listening to a podcast earlier this week where they were talking about the 2010 election and this specific moment, and one of the journalists was saying every time they spoke to the inner circle of Gordon Brown about immigration, he just wouldn't go there. He refused to go. It just couldn't. It wasn't even obstinance. He just couldn't work it out in his head why this was an issue and why he would therefore talk about it. He didn't have opinions on it, despite all the figures that were piling up even back then around him, the costs, the whole issue around social cohesion and jobs, etc. He couldn't make it work, so he left it alone. I wonder whether Andy Burnham is in a very similar place on this.
I think so, yes. I think he probably is. And, that clip with Brown versus Gillian Duffy, I mean, it really was a turning point in British politics because it opened so many people's eyes to what the political establishment thinks of us. They think we're bigots. And in fact, that thought process has probably got worse over the past 16 years. We know that the Labour Party in particular, but also the Conservative Party, is full of people who look down upon ordinary working class communities as a bit dodgy, as a bit bigoted, as low information, which is the trendy way to say stupid. We know that they have that view. We saw it during the Brexit referendum and in the aftermath when they just basically called us all thick. And as you say, that was 16 years ago. The immigration issue has got so much worse since then. I mean, back then, we were largely talking about Eastern European migrants, most of whom came over here and worked. There were questions about the numbers, of course, but now we're talking about something completely different. We're talking about millions of people coming to Britain over the past few years, some of whom don't work, many of whom are coming from countries that are very different to our own, with very different value systems, very different views of female equality, gay equality, Jewish people, and so on. We're talking about something completely different, and still they're calling us bigots. Still they're calling us racists for daring to say, listen, we think the borders should be be controlled. We think the numbers should be lowered. And we think people who came here illegally or who have outstayed their welcome should be sent home. None of those are bigoted ideas, and yet that's constantly what we're called.
Absolutely right. And of course, you know, when we talk about the cost of living, you could reasonably, we mentioned net zero, you could factor immigration into this as well. You know, we know that the daily bill is £6-7 million a day in accommodation. If you look at the longevity of people that are in this country, then the figure is much bigger than that in terms of, you know, healthcare and education and goodness knows what else. It's substantial. I mean, this does feed into the cost of living crisis that Mr. Burnham claims to be all ears.
Absolutely, it does. I mean, right from the hotel bill, which, as you say, is millions every day, and it raises the question right away in people's minds, you know, why are they being given a roof over their heads and 3 meals a day when I'm struggling to make ends meet? Perfectly legitimate question. But also, as you say, the longer term bill for the people who stay in this country and who have children and they use our schools and our health system, I mean, that bill is absolutely enormous. So it does touch on the cost of living. But, you know, I really feel as if the social contract is breaking down because, you know, where is it in our social contract that we should give welfare that you and I and others pay into? Where does it say in our social contract we should give that to people who were born overseas? Where does it say we should give that to people who came here 5 minutes ago? You know, when was it ever a thing that social housing should go to someone who just came to Britain, sometimes illegally, maybe legally? All of those things, part of the social contract of being a British citizen is that you paid your way, you worked hard, you kept your nose clean, and the government would look after you. That has fallen apart over the past 10 years, and that's what people are really angry about.
Absolutely are. Do you think, just a final point, that the other area that's going to, you know, still hanging around Andy Burnham's neck, although in fairness he did pause the early release programme while they looked at sort of categorising it down, made a little bit of progress on that. There's still some very high-profile cases. The killers of, as we know, of a police officer. I mean, the worst, the worst of the worst, if you like, when it comes to the kind of crimes and those responsible for it at the moment, that they still remain on the list of people who could be released despite taking the life of PC Andrew Harper.
Yeah, I'm so uncomfortable with this prisoner release scheme because it seems pretty reckless. If there is a prison space problem, which there is, then the solution is to build more prisons, not to let dangerous people out. There's statistics showing that many people will be victims of crime as a consequence of these early releases. That seems pretty inevitable. But it just feels to many people that the government is staggeringly cavalier about our safety. Yeah. It lets young men cross our borders every single day and puts them in local working class communities, not giving a damn about what might happen. It's letting prisoners out early. It's failing to clamp down on the antisocial behavior we see on our streets every single day. You know, it just feels like they don't take the safety of their citizens seriously. And that's why I think lots of people are uncomfortable with the prisons debate as well.
Brendan, on that point, thank you, and great to have you on as ever. We'll speak again very soon. Brendan O'Neill, Chief Political Writer at Spite. Thank you to him. Trevor Kavanagh joins us shortly as well. Loads of great comment coming through on this. We'll bring you more of them. Margaret in Birmingham says the tour is one big photo op. He knows what we want him to do. Stop the boats, take your head out of the sand, take the blinkers off. I hope Andy is wearing earplugs on this meet and greet tour. It's going to be interesting as to where he goes first. I don't know where he's going to be arriving today. And how does it manifest, this tour thing? Is he, I don't know, is he going on buses? Is he knocking on doors? Is he going to meet in the pub and have a pint and some of his favoured pork scratchings? Is he going to talk about Everton's latest signing over there at the community centre? Will he go to the old folks' home where he meets people who've not got a clue who he is? It's about the cost of living. So I've been out and I'm listening, I'm understanding. That in itself is not a bad thing. What he does about it is, of course, the next big step. And I don't, you know, most sensible and sane people will say you've got two areas that you can address straight away. One is the whole net zero thing. I mean, you think about this. So an entire government department that never used to exist is there now. I don't know how many civil servants work in that department. Ed Miliband used to run it. It's got a budget of God knows what, with all manner of ambitious planet-changing initiatives at the cost of billions. If he's scared about frightening off the left wing, I would take a compromise on this. I would say, OK, why don't we just have a pause on the net zero? We use all of that budget. So when John Healey gives his first budget in October, use every part of that budget to go into other areas to alleviate the cost of living issue. So whether it's energy, whatever. You then start, you know, the whole oil thing again and whatever else is required, because we need energy. We need to be in charge of our own energy. We don't need to be piping it in from other countries, and we certainly shouldn't be piping in North Sea oil from anywhere, considering that we're already there and it's on our shores. So it's all a nightmare and it's all ridiculous. And of course, he's got to get through his own party, his backbenchers, the left wing of the Labour Party. So the compromise should be, well, let's just have a pause on net zero. And we'll use that budget for the next, I don't know, what, 3 years? Say 3 years. The next 3 years, all of that budget will go elsewhere. What's wrong with that? It's very easy. Won't happen. The backbenchers are in the way again. 0344 499 1000. Trevor Kavanagh with us in just a couple of moments' time. Let's get a voice note on that famous Gordon Brown moment. This comes from Sarah. Morning, Sarah.
Morning, Ian. Great show. Thankfully, you've had Brendan O'Neill on, who was one of my favourite all-time people, apart from yourself, of course. But thankfully, he has counteracted that awful Paul Richards from earlier, which really put me in a grumpy mood on a Monday morning. Anyway, wow, I had totally forgotten about that clip with Gordon Brown, but that sums up how I feel the Labour government feel about us. I think he's absolutely nailed it. And I mean, I was shocked to realise it was 16 years ago, but oh my God, they still feel the same about us. They don't listen to us. They think we're there just as cash cows, basically. And what we think doesn't matter at all. Brilliant. Absolutely brilliant. That should be played and replayed and stuck out right out there. Brilliant.
This wouldn't be a story without the plagiarism allegations. That's what's the start.
You're saying also, would it be a story if he was white?
It wouldn't be a story if he was white at all, because he wouldn't have had there's no scrutiny that would have been put on him.
Well, he wouldn't have become famous, would he? He wouldn't have been a guest editor on the Day programme, the BBC, because he wasn't the youngest white professor at Cambridge.
He was the guest editor because he was talented. He could be talented. I've done things in the media because I'm good at things, not because I'm black. Like, we don't just get things because we're black, we get things because we're good.
Day on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Are you going to be one of those people that might get a knock on the door today? From the Prime Minister. He's on tour. Paul says, does Burnham's tour include all the places where the barracks are being used for migrants or places that have HMOs? I've got a funny feeling, call me cynical, and I think Paul shares this with me, I've got a funny feeling he might swerve some of those places. MC says, you are right, immigration is not in Andy Burnham's DNA. Yes, do not ask me about stopping the boats. Apparently over 900 over the weekend, 230 in one mega boat. Has he got something to say? Not really. He said, as many of you have pointed out, after Makerfield, I'm going to paraphrase him here, but I think he said something that didn't really come up on the doorstep. And I'm really struggling that in that area where, although he won the by-election, Reform gave him a run for his money, and a huge amount of council seats in those areas of Greater Manchester have gone to Reform as well. And, of course, they did some damage as well in the mayoral election. So the idea that immigration never came up at all, it's not really on the Burnham compass. it doesn't fire him up. And I just keep thinking that I'm not reinventing the wheel by saying this, but I think that they've crunched the numbers and they've said, Prime Minister, you don't need to go there. There's nothing in it for you if you go there, because you're never going to get a Reform voter who goes, oh, yeah, he's talking tough. I think I'm going to ditch Nigel Farage and I'm going to now vote for Andy Burnham's Labour Party. That's not going to happen. So there's nothing gained in doing it. Is that how it's working? Is there a deliberate calculation being made? Let's speak with Trevor Kavanagh, former political editor at The Sun, who knows his way around the Svengali-like world of Westminster politics. Morning to you, Trevor. Do you think that's the ballpark we're in here, that Team Burnham have just gone, look, it's the gallery you need to play to is those wavering Labour guys, the Corbynites, they're still yet to be convinced, and the Greens, some of whom might jump off the Polanski fence and hop over to yours. Is that what they've done here? Is that why we're not hearing animated talk about immigration?
Well, I think there's a strange sort of deafness and silence and muteness on the side of the Labour Party when it comes to immigration. It's as if they dare not discuss the subject in any real sense that resonates at any rate with the voters. And if you look at this latest poll showing that people are more and more concerned about the problem of rising immigration, it more or less reveals that everybody except Labour voters is worried and alarmed and feels that it's a very serious problem. And what Andy Burnham is doing is an exercise in performance politics, where he's going to tour the country in areas that he's carefully chosen in advance, which won't be hostile, and will bat his eyelashes and say smiley things to them, and everything will come out smelling of roses.
So this tour, designed, one assumes, to kind of compound this image of Andy as a normal bloke, and where other politicians either refused or just didn't appear to be listening to the people, he's different. Is it designed just to do that?
Yes, I think so. And I think you made the point, and so did Brendan earlier, that he is avoiding any confrontation, any questions that might expose weaknesses in Labour's stance on immigration. And I think you can't keep that up for any length of time and maintain any feeling among the voters that they can have confidence that you will take tough decisions. I mean, the thing about Andy Burnham is that he was elected to bring about change. Now, change can be bad as well as good. And for many people, I think that the sort of things that we know about so far are going to be highly risky for one thing, which is that he's going to certainly increase taxes when at this particular time in our economic history, he should be lowering them, especially on those affecting jobs for young people, and increasing money spent on welfare, which I think is a subsidy to unemployment. Not a solution to it, it's encouraging it. So these are really big problems, and he's ducking them.
Where is he, do you think, in terms of his politics, Trevor? Because he was, you know, when he tried to run for leadership before, I think the first time, he was kind of sort of heir to Blair type territory. You know, he was the sort of young pretender. He looked pretty good. He sounded quite normal. I couldn't tell you whether his record as health secretary from memory was a positive one, but he did that for a couple of years. And, you know, he was seen as the sort of a younger politician. This is obviously nearly 2 decades ago now, so he's a little older, and that's great. So he was that heir to Blair type, and then he was sort of Corbyn-y type. But who's the real Andy Burnham here? You've known him for years. Well, how would you, if you were forced to say, describe his politics, where would it be from a left-wing perspective?
Well, I think the fact that you even raised the question actually begs the question.
Yes.
That this is a man who has, from the outer ranks, outer margins of the Labour machine, from his role as mayor of Manchester, suddenly decided he wants to be prime minister. And for some bizarre reason, the party that he now leads decided to let him have it. And everybody I know who has known him much better and more at closer quarters than I have during his period as an early riser in Labour ranks, and then as a cabinet minister, and during his campaign on 2 occasions in the past to lead the Labour Party, are left as baffled as you and I are right now about what he actually stands for. I think he stands for apple pie and, you know, jam tomorrow, and nothing that's going to require hard or unpopular decisions, particularly unpopular decisions affecting his own backbenchers. So I think he's a man who so far is indicating that he's running scared of his own party and unprepared and unable to deliver the hard choices necessary to save this country.
Yeah, it's interesting you say that you know, by even asking the question exposes the problem. If you and I were sitting in a pub having a crafty pint and we were, as two sort of political anoraks, as well as doing this for a living, Trevor, were charged with coming up with a list of the big hitters of the Brown and Blair years, we might throw a Charles Clarke in there, and Alan Johnson, maybe Blunkett would get a look in. We would probably have John Reid on there as well. You know, we might come up. I don't think either of us would have mentioned Andy Burnham.
No, I think that, you know, I was working in the lobby in Parliament at that time, and he was just a nice bloke, and with nothing more to him than that in terms of political character. And, you know, there were some big, some tall poppies in the Labour government at that time, as you've already enumerated. People who you could respect when you sat down and talked to them. They really had something to tell you about what they wanted to achieve. I don't think that we can really point to anything that Andy Burnham has done. And the interesting thing, Ian, is that this was exactly the charge that was levelled at his predecessor. Keir Starmer was a blank sheet of paper. Nobody knew what he was planning to do, including Morgan McSweeney, who was basically his brain in Downing Street. Nobody knew what he stood for, what he would not stand for, and so on. And I think that Andy Burnham is just a more genial version of that.
I think you're absolutely spot on. And I do wonder, again, you know, it's all very well him coming away with this tour for this week. And then I think Downing Street said he's in listening mode for August, which I thought was a bit of a clumsy way to put it, because that does sort of rather suggest that after August, he's no longer going to be listening. But I take the point of what they were trying to say. But, of course, listening and doing are two very different things. And what I think the country are crying out for is a Prime Minister that does stuff.
Yes, I think to govern is to choose, and there are always hard choices. And the only way that this government or any government is going to salvage this country, which is in serious disrepair at the moment in all sorts of ways, health service, criminal justice, you name it, the economy, is for the money that we levied as taxpayers is spent wisely. And it isn't being spent wisely, and it hasn't been for a long time. And what we need is the sort of tax cuts or reform that will enable people to get into work, especially that 9 million people who are on some form of work-related benefits rather than being in full-time employment. That is a hideous inheritance from previous governments, and Andy Burnham is doing precious little to do anything about it.
Absolutely spot on. Thank you, Trevor. Good to see you again. Trevor Kavanagh, former political editor at The Sun. He never retires, Trevor Kavanagh. His ear is always to the ground. His feelers are out. His political antenna is never off. Thank you to him. This one from Ben in London. Great interview with Ambassador Stefano Pontecorvo. To say it was eye-opening is to underestimate the problems of the Italian. His father got a pension of €600 a month, yet a migrant gets €1,200 a month. Surely this is wrong. That was I don't know whether that ambassador, has he been on the station before, Dean? I think I might have even asked you that during the break. He might have appeared before, but that was absolutely eye-opening. So he's Italian, he's a former ambassador, you still hold the title of ambassador for the rest of time, a supporter of the Meloni government, broadly, but he's losing will on that one. But he outlined the problems in Italy with essentially, and I don't say this as a pejorative, of third world immigration and the problems it has caused socially, the unrest, the crime side of it, the lack of absolute chronic lack of social cohesion and the sheer cost of it. And his point was really that Meloni's just not, she promised a lot and hasn't delivered anywhere near. Now, it's in her heart to deliver. We know that much. This was all part of her thing. There is another person further to the right who's standing there in the wings waiting for action, who claims he will solve all of these issues. But he did talk, and I thought overarchingly, my takeaway, and thank you, Ben, for your message, my takeaway from his the interview we did with him was he talked about the structural problem of Africa and the amount of the unemployment predictions for Africa as a continent going forward. And you could be looking at a couple of 100 million people looking to go elsewhere who won't find gainful employment or a future in their own continent and will look elsewhere. So his assessment was that Europe's issue with immigration, Europe's issue, which is also our issue, we are not the EU, the continent, is likely to get worse. That was his assessment. But it was fascinating, and I'm glad Ben and others spotted that. Thank you. More to come. We're going to be speaking to Peter Barnes in a second. We did talk about hobbies earlier on, and the only reason we spoke about it is because I just spotted a story of how some people choose to unwind. And there was apparently a growing trend out there for reenactment. You know, people who pretend to be a Roundhead or a Cavalier, and then they have a battle. And then they do some jousting. I'm sure, I know I'm mixing up parts of my history here, but broadly speaking, you take the point. You stick some armour on, you cock your leg over a horse and try and knock another person off it with a big stick. There's also medieval combat, which is a little bit more potentially dangerous. It just got us into the conversation of unusual hobbies. On that very point, Matt drops us this voice note. Morning to you, Matt.
Hello, Ian. Matt in Warrington. You talk about people having hobbies a bit unusual. Many years ago, a mate we worked with was sat in a garden pub, and there was Morris dancers, and when he was looking, one of the lads who worked with us was Morris dancing with his wife, and he pleaded with him not to say anything, and he said he promised he wouldn't. And then on Monday, when he started the shift, as he pulled up in car park, everyone in the yard was with keys taped around the ankles, with hankies on the top, with sticks in the hands, while Morris dancing. He never lived it down. So, yeah, if you're going to go Morris dancing, just make sure none of your mates see you from work. Great show, mate. Ta-ra.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Yeah, morning, 20 to 10. It is Talk. Loads still to come. Julia Hartley-Brewer here after the news at 10 o'clock. She'll pitch up before then and give us the lowdown of what is happening on her show. Let's get a word with Peter Barnes, political strategist, on a collection of the stories out there today. Morning to you, Peter. As a strategist, would you... I mean, nothing wrong with... If you were advising the Prime Minister, here he is, he's only, a couple of weeks in, few weeks in, I should say, into the job. He's just had a week's holiday. A bit unusual that you would do that so soon into a job. I'm not going to beat him up on that point. It might have been one of those things that a Prime Minister's diary is so crammed, they could have said, look, if you don't have one this week, you can't have one till next April, or something bizarre. You've got a NATO summit coming up, you've got the G7, all of that. So I get it, all right? Anyway, he's back in the saddle, and he's going big guns out there, Peter Barnes. He's off in his battle bus. Don't know if there's an actual bus, but he's going round the UK to meet the people. Our Andy, normal Andy, is on the listen, and apparently, according to Downing Street, August, he's in listening mode, which sort of rather suggests cynically that September he's not, but who knows? What would you be advising him to do this? Because the optics aren't bad, but it's whether it amounts to anything.
It's 100% what he should be doing. And of course, there's going to be a bus involved. It's Andy Burnham. So there's always a bus involved. That's the rule now, isn't it? But realistically, he's doing two things. He's shoring up his personal branding. He's doing the whole, isn't Andy a nice guy? Doesn't everybody like Andy? He's the only one with a positive favorability rating right now. This is, as I've been saying since he became Prime Minister, it's all about a general election. It's all about shoring up his own personal brand so that when the general election hits, he has to start defending the Labour Party record. He has his personal branding as a shield and a buffer that will help him kind of convince people that that was the old Labour. He's the new guy. He's the new one doing things. That's what's really important here, because yes, while it's branding, there's one other thing that he gets to do now. He gets to set the agenda of the next general election. He didn't listen to pollsters. He didn't listen to focus groups or, the blob or the media. I went out into the people. I listened to them. I think this is what they told me on the doorstep, that the biggest issue of the next general election is not migration, it's cost of living. That's what he's doing. Yeah. He's setting the agenda and taking it away from Reform and the Tories and everybody else so that he gets to dominate on one issue. Because what are Reform really weak on at the moment? Economic credibility. So again, when you kind of take a step back, see the whole board, this is exactly what he should be doing. And it's why the right, as I've said, should never underestimate Andy Burnham. Politically, he's a dunce. Strategically, he's one of the smartest people in Westminster. He has an excellent political weather vane. It's why he's survived as long as he has without being any good at anything.
That would that's a great analysis. Surviving without being that good at anything is a wonderful. That which rather sort of describes so many people who run our institutions and the Peter principle in kind of all its glory. You sort of alluded to, calling an election. Would I extrapolate from what you just said then, Peter, that you think there's going to be an early general election?
Yeah, think about what they've just said. We're in listening mode till August. What happens in August? Conference season. Yeah. He gets to look like the Prime Minister all over the, the quiet period while everybody's in recess. He's got all this branding around him, all of that kind of stuff. He then comes back for only 2 weeks. That's 2 weeks of scrutiny. It's conference season. He then gets to be the big speech, prime time. Not everybody pays attention. He dominates the next narrative. He dominates the narrative for the next couple of weeks, and then I think there's going to be a general election roughly about November time, November, December. Wow. Purely because at the moment he's still not got the stain of the Starmer years. He's still not got that baggage of the Labour Party. So he needs to have a general election before that starts to really hit, and that's why I think there's going to be a general election by the end of the year.
That's going to be fascinating. It does divide the room, that question, because some people are saying, no, he's going to... But you're right, he's never going to be... I remember one senior advisor around Tony Blair, when Tony Blair came back for his second term in power. I can't remember who it was, one of the real senior bods over there, said to him on day one of his second term, this is the most powerful you will ever be. And it was
without a doubt
in that very short window. So Burnham's in that place. I mean, every day that passes, he stands to lose, right?
Yeah, without 100%. We say it all the time. He doesn't have a mandate. But think about the narrative you get to spin. I've been out in the country. I've seen the division. I've seen the deprivation. I've seen this for myself up and down this nation. He gets to move away from this northern focus. And he says, I'm the one needs a fresh mandate for what I see as the vision for the future. This is how you do it. This is how you start to build for a general election. You build momentum. He doesn't need to fix anything. He doesn't need to announce anything at the moment. He just needs to build the feeling of change, the feeling of motion. And that's literally how you do it. And, a national tour in the middle of silly season while, you've got other leaders fighting amongst themselves like rats in a sack, there's no better way to look like the only person with a credible plan in the room.
Absolutely. He's... has he got to say anything on immigration between now and then? Because it's the one area, and we've talked about it literally since 6 a.m. this morning, that it's not, his political weather vane, as you referred to it, doesn't very often ping in the direction marked immigration. Similarly with his predecessors, doesn't get him out of bed in the morning, doesn't feel as strongly as others. But has he got to go there? Or is he just simply working on the basis there's no point in me going there? I gain nothing by going there because I'm not exactly going to change the mind of a Reform voter who's suddenly going to vote for me.
That's very right. I listened to Trevor Kavanagh with you just before. He's avoiding conflict, so he's going to avoid the immigration issue like you've never seen. However, he doesn't need to. The numbers and the statistics trend in Labour's favour.
Yep.
They are coming down. So he gets to say, our plan is working. It's not perfect. There's work to do. But our plan shows the numbers coming down. Can anybody else point to that? No, they can't. It's the credibility issue. So, you know, everybody can start talking about leaving the ECHR and all deportations, all this stuff. It's all pie in the sky. What he gets to say is, I've got physical proof of numbers going down. And that's what's really going to be in the headlines and what he gets to hit back in leaders and debates and all the rest of it. That's why he doesn't need to touch this issue. I actually think, like I said, it's cost of living. But what have we actually started to see very slowly? The creep back and the slow reversal of net zero. What is net zero really about? Energy bills. That is, you know, we see, once you put it all together, it's very undeniable to say that this is a general election, or at least as number 10 that is in constant campaign mode. That's what we're seeing.
Peter, thank you. Great analysis and an interesting reveal from Peter Barnes that he thinks November there could be an election. Lots more to come, including that headline, front of the Sun, jet bomb plotters free in weeks. It's a disturbing story. We'll talk to the journalist who broke this in just a couple of moments right here on Talk.
Sex space is on biological sex, and therefore you cannot have people going into a women's space which is for women only, who is not a biological woman.
I was wondering whether that interview was conducted on April Fool's Day, because I think it was a new low in the sort of...
A new low for low?
A new low for low, because, I mean, just the absurdity of not being able to ask a very basic question about the monarch of our country.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
It is Talk. Welcome back. It's 10 to 10. Joining, we're talking about this front page. We've mentioned it throughout the entire course of the morning. Jet bomb plotters free in weeks. The journalist that broke this story, Ricky Freelove, is with us. It's worth sort of declaring an interest here. Ricky and I have known each other for years because he was my first producer here at Talk. I mean, I use the word producer very loosely, obviously. But back in the day, and you were here at Talk up until about 6 weeks ago.
I was, yeah. And it's lovely to be back.
And you legged it to another floor. Called The Sun.
You might have heard of them.
Where you are the social news editor at The Sun. And here we are, just weeks into the job, and you've got a front page splash on this. So congratulations on the journalism, Ricky.
Thank you very much.
I know you're good at this stuff because I've known you long enough, but this is a really disturbing story. That the people, this goes back to 2006, essentially, when a bunch of people, nice guys, decided to blow up some aeroplanes. What happened?
Yeah, I mean, this is an unbelievable story. Back in the summer of 2006, it's actually 20 years ago today, believe it or not, that MI5 and counter-terror cops busted this terror cell of 7 men who had taken the liquids out of bottles and replaced them with explosives. And the plan was to board 7 aircraft flying from the UK over to America and Canada and detonate these liquid explosives mid-air, or potentially causing a terrorist event bigger than 9/11.
thousands of people.
Thousands of people, up to 10,000 people. And that was the aim, you know, in 2006, was to have something bigger than 7/7, something bigger than 9/11.
Yeah.
And it is amazing work from counter-terror cops at the time who foiled this terror cell in 2006. And it took years to convict these men. It was a very complicated case where there was a trial, a retrial, a very rare second retrial. And it was, of course, Keir Starmer, who was the Director of Public Prosecutions in 2010, who pushed for this second retrial to get these three men, Wahid Zaman, Arafat Wahid Khan and Ibrahim Savant, who were all British nationals, convicted for conspiracy to murder. The previous trial was talking about a conspiracy to blow up aeroplanes. Now, the defence was that they didn't supposedly know that there were civilian airliners with people on board, which I don't know how they managed to come to a conclusion that they weren't guilty for that. But they were eventually found guilty of a conspiracy to murder in 2010. They have now completed their full 20 years. This is not part of the early release prisoner scheme. They have done their full 20 years, almost to the day, and they are up for parole in the autumn. Now, obviously, the question is, what happens next? Can these people ever be rehabilitated? Can they be de-radicalised? And I don't think people really quite know the answer to that. This is the first time we've really seen this on Britain's streets.
This story changed the way we fly in many respects, from the sort of serious internal checks and things that they do, down to the fact that I can no longer take me Old Spice onto an aeroplane, because that's when they took the limit of what liquids you can take on a plane down to, I think it was, what, 100 millilitres?
100 mils, that's right.
Yeah.
So it was on the day, the 10th of August, overnight, hand luggage was banned altogether, all liquids were gone as well, everything, all gone. And that was absolute chaos across all UK airports in the peak of summer season as well, on holidays.
So all hand luggage as well for a period of time. You couldn't take anything with you?
Nothing. There was nothing at all allowed on any aeroplanes. Over the following weeks, it started to calm down, where obviously this clearly had been foiled and there wasn't a critical terror threat anymore. And that's when we started seeing the 100 mils, the plastic bags that we still see today. So it has literally changed the way we travel, and it's also created this sort of miniature shampoo industry worth something like £4.5 billion or something like that.
So that was spawn out of that, really?
All out of this
plot.
plot.
I hadn't thought. I mean, I always thought those little containers were there anyway, but they probably weren't.
No, that's right. And these are all things that we see now buying airports. They cost you an arm and leg to be able to do. And that all came from this plot, which was foiled by cops.
Matey Bubble Bath didn't get in on the act because you can't buy one of those little miniature ones. Which is, do you not remember that as a kid? It was the little sailor bubble bath. Dean remembers it. I know Dean's older than God's dog, so he. But yeah, it was a beautiful thing. But so it changed everything. Now, of course, these guys are coming out of jail. I can hear a left-wing lawyer saying, "Look, Ricky Freelove, you can write as many front pages as you like. These people have served their time. What's the point in talking about it?"
Look, and it's a really, really good question, because what is the point of having a minimum term if we're not going to sort of agree to that is the minimum? And they've clearly, well, presumably been well behaved in prison. They've not done anything which suggests that they're going to stay for any longer. But now there really are questions about what does somebody need to do to be seen as be rehabilitated back into society.
I mean, there is such a thing as rehabilitation. I mean, Kemi Badenoch was, hiring a sort of former neo-Nazi the other day who, the whole claim there was he's been rehabilitated. He was up to some pretty grubby stuff back in the day, now makes amusing satirical videos and turned his life around, lectures and talks about anti-Semitism, the dangers of extremism. Now, I don't feel comfortable thinking that these guys have I don't feel confident, rather, that these guys might have gone on that journey. We know that prisons can be the worst place to get. It's all very well going on a course to rehabilitate you. There's many more sort of off-grid courses in the cells that will completely compound your existing extremism and make things a whole lot worse.
Absolutely, and this I've heard it a few times already. We should just deport them. These are British nationals. There's no, even case to consider that they're going to be deported or sent somewhere else, unless Nigel Farage's got some idea of sending them to El Salvador or something like that. But maybe. But they are, they are British nationals. There's no way of removing them or getting rid of them. But this is potentially the worst conspiracy you could possibly do. The conspiracy to murder thousands of civilians. It is the worst possible crime, I think, probably imaginable. That you just start questioning, is 20 years enough for even just being part of the plot? Now, these men, they recorded suicide videos, these martyrdom videos, where they have a flag behind them, and they basically denounce the West, and they say, the reason for why they are choosing to blow themselves up, and these videos would have been distributed once they had killed themselves. So it's like, we've got pretty hard evidence that they planned to do something absolutely horrendous.
It's bizarre that the first case collapsed.
Yeah, I think
these are sort of legal technicalities and bizarre quirks in our laws.
That's right, and it's this idea of conspiracy to murder by blowing up an aeroplane, which again, it's like it was very technical about how they managed to get off. There was also another charge leveled at them at the same time, which didn't quite come off, so they had to go to another route. It's very complicated from sort of a court view, but ultimately, I think the right conviction was come to by the jury. However, we're now at the 20-year point where the sentence, what is it enough?
Yes.
Because clearly, you know, there's now question marks about whether it was.
Interesting that Keir Starmer, and you know this, when we talk about Keir Starmer, he is known by many people as a man who specialised in not prosecuting people and not being, you know, in the right place or with the right antennae for this. And I know, you know, if you don't like Keir Starmer, we will blame him for everything. I'm sure Jack the Ripper would have been completely hung, drawn, and quartered, and we'd know who he was. You know, if some people had their way, but you know, Keir Starmer was seen in that sort of political light that he wasn't robust on crime. There's not really, you know, much evidence for that, in fairness, because he was not an MP at the time, wasn't leading a party, but he was the guy that made this second case happen.
Absolutely, and he made a really good point at the time. He said that he thought this was not unjust. He thought there was a realistic prospect that these three men that we're talking about today would be convicted with the evidence that they had at the time. Now, if we've got time, back in the day, the Brits and the Americans had a big old fallout about this. The Brits wanted to hold on until the last possible minute to make sure they had all the evidence they could possibly need, whereas the Americans' view was just like, we need to bust this right now.